If the works of H.P. Lovecraft are known for one thing, well, one thing besides the copious amount of tentacles, it's for the very specific sorts of protagonists he wrote. In an era known in the speculative space for its pulp fiction, with action heroes and deeds of daring do, Lovecraft's go-to protagonists were scrawny academics, police officers occasionally, normal people who by pure chance are pitted against the unfathomable. Sure, they may have one or two unique skills, their brains or their ability to keep a cool head, their connection to a bizarre dream world, what have you, but at the end of the day, they are just like you and I. And just like the ordinary people they are, they can't handle the truth of the cosmos and are driven to madness. Chapter 5 of Higurashi, titled as Meakashi-hen, or Eye-Opening Chapter, is primarily about this concept. About an ordinary person, in this case a teenager, pitted against forces which she cannot even begin to comprehend. The question is, will she ultimately succumb to the madness of her Lovecraftian counterparts? I mean, yes, obviously the answer is yes, this is fucking Higurashi, what do you expect? Hello everyone, I'm Hedgehog, welcome back to this nonsense, and this is Higurashi. Apologies once again for the long break in between these episodes, but I really wanted to come into this one with a fresh mind, because it is absolutely one of my favorite chapters. Meakashi-hen is the first of the answer arcs, the chapters that set out to answer all of the questions raised in the, well, question arcs. Each of these chapters will roughly correspond with a previous question chapter, and this one happens to be paired with Watanagashi-hen, Chapter 2, which is my other favorite chapter. Needless to say, this one's about the Sonozaki sisters. Unlike the question arcs, which besides the fourth chapter all primarily took place from Keiichi Maebara's perspective, the answer arcs work to broaden the scope of Higurashi's storytelling. You might have noticed earlier that I called the teenage protagonist a she, and well, that's because this story takes place from, of all people, Shion Sonozaki's perspective. Nope, it's not Mion. This might not make a whole ton of sense to you right now. I mean, Shion was pretty much sidelined for the entire second half of Chapter 2, so what could her perspective add to that story? Oh, my friend. You don't even know. But as always, before we get into it, I have to shill, for myself at least. If you like these videos, if they have made you feel any sort of emotion, then pretty please, if you would, consider checking out my Patreon. It keeps me in snack and Vimeo game. Hopefully I can start doing some fun patron-exclusive live streams if enough people sign up for it. Second, I recently started posting a new series of original stories over on my other channel. They're technically a sequel to some other stuff I posted several years ago, but if you want some proof that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to stories, it won't take you all that long to catch up, so grab that podcast link that just popped up in the corner. If you like Higurashi, I have a feeling you'll like my stuff a lot. Finally, as always, kudos goes out to all my voice actors for giving up their precious time on this earth to help me out. They are all so fucking talented, so either follow the links in the description to their stuff or the Discord server to go talk to them about it. Also, hit that cheeky subscribe button, likes and comments, even if it's just to tell me that you hate me and I suck. Please, I am screaming out into the void, scream back if you would. Thank. So now, without further ado, let's get the fuck into it. It's finally time to start unraveling this tangled-ass narrative. It begins, as it always does, with a note from the author. Welcome to the world of Higurashi When They Cry Kai. We've finally reached the halfway point. From the viewpoint of the protagonist, try to find the truth behind the tragedy that unfolds. The difficulty is very high. It won't be easy to comprehend the motive of the perpetrator. 7 keys were attached to the keychain. Without knowing which key was the correct one, I had to go by instinct and try every key, one by one. On average, I'd reach the correct key within 3.5 attempts. I'd be fortunate if I could open the lock within the first 3 keys, and I'd be unfortunate if I didn't. Yeah, I really hope you like listening to the sound of my voice, because it's gonna be like the entirety of this chapter. At first, we have no idea where Shion is and why she's trying to open this door. We don't even really know if this is Shion. I mean, we know because of the voice acting, but it's fine. Clearly, this is not a scenario where she is leisurely trying out keys as she enters a sort of panic when her task goes south. What happened was worse than my worst-case scenario. None of the keys worked at all. But she calms down, clears her head, and elects to try the keys one more time. A series of footsteps from down the hall momentarily halt her, and in a panic, she drops the keyring. Luckily for her, it seems like whoever was passing didn't notice. I have to clarify. This isn't a prison or a detention center. It's a private school. Apparently, for the last couple of years, Shion has been sent away to a special Catholic private school called St. Lucia's, which is dedicated to training perfect young women. From everything we know about Shion, I'm sure you're well aware that this environment is absolutely unbearable for her. To me, saying, "How nice to see you," instead of just "hi" is already insane, and calling the teachers sisters gives me the creeps. If I stayed in this institution, that's what I call the place, for many years, I'd either go crazy or be brainwashed. Most of the girls choose to be brainwashed, but I can't do that. So, after years of trying desperately to appear how they want her to be, and failing utterly, Shion has decided to pull a jailbreak. Of course, you may be asking yourself, when was this? The Shion we know is comfortably living and going to public school in Okinomiya, so what is she doing jailbreaking from a private school? Bear with me, we'll get to it soon enough. Shion has spent 6 months systematically planning her escape. The security here is super tight due to its student body largely consisting of the daughters of important people, and it ironically works well to keep the students in as well. But this is fucking Shion Sonozaki. If there's anyone that can worm their way out of here, it's her. She even goes so far as to start a rumor about a relationship between a male teacher and a student, so that when she is found missing, the faculty will think that she's run away to be with him. So now we cut back to Shion and her stolen ring of keys, and this time, having a calmer head, one of the keys fits into the lock. I slowly open the door. I could hear the crickets. I don't have to hesitate now, but somehow I'm reluctant to step outside. I can still make excuses up to this point, but if I take a step outside now, there can be no excuse. You see, all the school's horror stories involve students who attempted escapes. But she steels herself and begins walking. She's researched the positions of the surveillance cameras, but the guards' routes are random, so she'll have to be careful to avoid them. This is a gamble, after all. When I realized that, I got excited. Yes, this is a gamble. I'm trying my luck. This is a game to test the determination to change my life. Shion is a bit odd, isn't she? I ignored the noisy bugs and concentrated only on suspicious sounds. I heard no threats. The loudest sound wasn't the bugs. It was my own heartbeat. I'm worried that my senses might not be keen enough to detect everything. Somebody might be right behind me, without me being aware of it. That's an oddly specific thought to have. After fighting with herself to keep from running and making too much noise, Shion finally reaches the fence at the edge of the school. She hops over it fairly easily, only to land on her butt on the other side. It's still a little early until the rendezvous, whatever that means, so she hides herself in darkness and waits. Finally, a car approaches in the distance. Recognizing it as the one she's been waiting for, Shion leaps out of the bushes and into the passenger seat. This opening scene is pretty different from what we're used to with this game. The question arcs as a whole were very formulaic, to say the least. They were sort of designed to lull you into this false sense of security due to the fact that even if you didn't know the specifics of the story, you knew basically how the chapter was going to go. The answer arcs are all about breaking those rules, at first in small ways, but increasingly in bigger ways as we continue forward, and this high-intensity start is the signifier of these changes. Be prepared, it's only going to get more unpredictable from here. Anyway, Shion is greeted by the car's driver, an older man named Kasai.
Nice to see you, Shion-san.
Kasai is an old friend of Shion's father. He used to be part of his Yakuza outfit, being in charge of several major areas, but then he got pretty injured in a fight and decided to retire. Now he's just a consultant for Shion's dad, and also primarily in charge of watching Shion. That seems like a pretty big downgrade, but Kasai genuinely doesn't seem to mind. It also helps him stay close to Shion's mom, whom it seems he has some additional history with. This is never really relevant over the course of the game, but there's some interesting details that help to flesh out the world of the game and tell us a bit more about some of the other associates of the Sonozaki family. Shion and Kasai bicker for a few minutes about not much of anything before the topic shifts to more important matters. How's Sis?
I believe she's fine. I only see her when I bring your father to the family councils.
Because, of course, Mion has been living in Hinamizawa with Oryo, the sister's grandmother. Shion more often refers to her as the hag, though. Shion asks if Mion has changed, which is an honest question. She's been training to be the new head of the Sonozaki family after all, but Kasai responds in the negatory. What about me? Did I change? Kasai smirks at her, to which she responds with a glare.
You haven't changed at all. That's admirable, since you've been in such a strict school for so long.
Damn it, laugh as much as you want. I'm going to sleep. Talking with Kasai reminds her of the old days in Okinomiya right before she got sent off to boarding school, which was apparently shortly after the dam protests. She shares some pretty similar memories of that time as her sister. Fond memories. It was a war. It might also have been a festival. A festival where every person in Hinamizawa joined together in protest. It was a struggle, but it was also fun. A jolt from the car wakes her back up, and Shion realizes that they're pretty close to home now. Kasai, however, has a concern. Since it was Oryo who decided that Shion should go to the boarding school, her being back is in direct violation of the family head's orders.
You do understand the situation you're in.
I know. It's especially annoying because it seems like the decision for Shion to go away had been made before she'd been even born. The Sonozaki family only needs one successor, after all. So when Shion and Mion were born twins, it kind of put a wrench in that whole idea. Remember how the name Mion has the character for demon in it? Well, Shion has the character for temple, which means that she was always meant to be put away in a temple like some problematic medieval queen. To be fair, she has had it pretty good, as the family tradition states that she was actually supposed to be strangled to death immediately after she was born. So that's great. Shion finds this whole succession thing really silly, as in her mind there's ultimately no difference between her and Mion. But the first one out of my mom's stomach was named Mion, and the second one drew the short straw and got named Shion. Everyone else was desperate to tell us apart, but we sisters just found that awfully ridiculous. They could just switch hats and people would mistake them for each other. They had some good fun with it, until that is, they got older. One day, they created an undeniable, clear distinction between Mion and Shion. Mion went to live with the hag, and Shion got sent to St. Lucia's. Shion admits that she used to be jealous of Mion's inheritance, but now she mostly just feels bad for her. Shion has no intention to cause trouble upon her return, she just wants Oryo to let her live in Okinomiya, where she grew up. But the hag doesn't seem to think that way. She thinks of me as some kind of evil omen.
If you go back to Okinomiya, somebody from the family will notice you, and then they'll report you to the main house. I hope you understand the situation.
Kasai doesn't think she should go back to school, but he wants her to know that the situation is going to be more complicated than she might think. He in particular is in danger, as will be anyone that helps her if the main family finds out about it. Shion is taking a lot of people's lives into her hands, but of anyone in her life, Kasai is the person she trusts the most, which is saying something considering she contacted him over her own parents. But despite Kasai's concerns, Shion has thought this through, and she's got a plan. Well, I'll lay low for now. If somebody sees me, I'll tell them I'm Mion. Then, after things calm down a little bit, I'll start talking to my closest relatives. I know they'll be on my side. There were so many people who were opposed to the idea of enrolling me in that school. That decision was obviously made because of the hag's hatred toward me. Finally, after talking for a long time, the car falls silent. After a while, Kasai points at a sign that reads, "Welcome to Shishibone City." Shion is finally coming home. Shion wakes up at the time she normally would for the morning bell. Even if she's now hiding out in a high-end apartment complex owned by her father that's mostly empty at the moment. The apartment I'm living in used to be the room they'd use for viewings, so it looks like a room in a business hotel. It's fully furnished, but lacking in daily necessities. I'll buy those things over time, though. Shortly after Shion wakes up, Kasai shows up with some lunch.
Good morning, Shion-san. Did you sleep well last night?
Shion is grateful for his assistance, but knows she can't take advantage of his wallet forever. I think I'm going to start a part-time job. I have to earn my own living. This is the life I chose, so naturally I have to take care of it myself.
That's reassuring to hear, but are you sure? If you go outside, eventually someone in the family will discover you.
But Shion's thought of that too, and has come up with a dastardly plan to earn enough money to keep herself in food while still avoiding detection. But she's going to need help for it to succeed. Shion asks Kasai to make a phone call for her.
Good morning. Is this Mion-san? Could you hold for a moment? I'm letting someone else on the phone.
Hello? Can you tell who this is?
That voice. But that can't be true. Shion's dorm doesn't allow private calls. Did you sneak out of the school? How?
That's not important. I really missed you, sis.
Gah, Shion.
We both burst into laughter, unable to keep up our act. So, hey, funny thing. You know how it seemed for the first entire half of this fucking novel that Shion and Mion didn't like each other? Yeah, well, apparently this was all an act that they think is funny?
It's been forever, Shion. Seriously, what's happened with you?
After confirming that Oreo is out of the house at the moment, the two sisters talk for a few minutes, catching up on everything that's happened while Shion has been away. Apparently, Mion is really becoming the successor now, down to screening all of Oreo's calls. Any communication goes through her. Shion makes her promise that if she hears anything about her, she'll let her know. Finally, Shion is able to get to the point, and she doesn't really have to explain her plan for Mion to understand.
So, I just have to disappear while you're working, right?
Shion is going to pretend to be Mion while she's working, so no one suspects she's back, and Mion is going to hide out until she's done. For now, it seems like a plan that just might work. They agree to meet at a later date to properly catch up, before hanging up the phone. Mion?
What is it?
How are you?
I'm fine.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm hanging up now. Shion now goes to contact her uncle Yoshiro, whom she knows was on her side and also owns a local business. As it turns out, the business he owns is, of course, Angel Mort. You might remember Angel Mort. How could you not, right? It's giving Tyrant Vietnam flashbacks.
Yeah, then it's come to this. It's time for the last resort.
Yoshiro is totally down to give her the job and sets her up with a schedule immediately, one that fits in with Mion's schedule. God, I wish I could be a Nepo baby too. After that's all taken care of, her and Yoshiro catch up a bit. Shion also needs to know what's happened in the past 2 years so she can easily pretend to be Mion. Shion has been at St. Lucia's since shortly after the dam project was officially frozen. She remembers the dismemberment murder and the accident involving the Hojos. I won't go into it like the novel does, because you can just go watch the previous videos again if you need a refresher. Yes, give me your sweet, sweet watch time, I crave it. It sure is scary when it happens 2 years in a row. I still believe in Oyashiro-sama's power. Wait. Oh. Shion doesn't know. Yoshiro quickly corrects her. It happened for a 3rd year. Rika's parents. But wait, he doesn't mention the 4th year incident at all, the one where totally not Satoshi murdered his aunt with a baseball bat. So, clearly that one hasn't happened yet. As one of the more gruesome of the events, one would think that it would be high on that priority list to mention. Earlier, the game informed us that the year is 1982, but you might not have thought about what that means yet. It means that we're going through an entire 2 years in this chapter instead of 1. You were wondering why this video was so fucking long. Shion meets with Mion at the Okinomiya library to properly catch up. People don't usually go in there, so it's really quiet and a good place for secret meetings. Mion catches her up on all the events of the last couple of years, mostly stuff we already know. The repeat information is a little much this chapter, but keep in mind that Meakashi-hen wasn't out until December of 2004, almost a year and a half after Tatarigoroshi-hen, the last proper Higurashi chapter. People were gonna need to catch back up, and even nowadays when you can go straight from chapter 4 into chapter 5, it is a really good breaking point, one that I definitely took advantage of, so when I originally read this chapter, I really appreciated the catch up. Anyway, what's actually important about this scene is that Mion expresses an opinion that Shion doesn't agree with, and it takes her aback. We've never had a difference in opinion this big. It wasn't an enjoyable feeling. After thinking about it for a second, Shion realizes, however, that Mion made the mature call of the two of them, and she starts to realize the difference the last 2 years have made. You sound like a grown-up now. Am I thinking like Granny now? That's good. You're the successor. You've definitely learned the art of ruling. Mion seems embarrassed by that, claiming that Shion could do it just as well. It seems like Mion has a little bit of imposter syndrome going on, and Shion tries to smooth things over. Our separation has always been tough. Our names, the places where we live, and our bodies. Maybe you think I'm jealous of that, but I'm not. I used to get mad about it when I was little. There's no denying that. But we don't have to start a disagreement over it. It seems like they're talking in code. I don't even quite know what she just meant, and I voiced her. I'm kidding, of course. I know exactly what's going on here. But you don't. And that's what's important. Do your best, Mion. I'll do my best as Shion, too. Okay. Thanks, Shion. No worries, Mion. Let's talk to each other whenever we want to, like we've always been. That'll never change, okay? Shion goes home feeling much better and makes Kasai dinner to thank him. They bicker a bit, as they tend to do, and Kasai notices something he thinks is funny.
Shion-san, do you still hate canned food?
Apparently, Shion has a hatred of canned food, and it's all Kasai's fault. He told her a horror story about it when she was a kid. You know, one of those urban legends. about meat made from an unknown source. Wait a second. That seems oddly specific. Haven't we heard something like that before? Where was it? Oh well, I've totally forgotten, and I'm sure that won't come back to haunt us later. A couple of weeks have passed, and Shion is getting used to her new lifestyle in Mion's shadow, down to usually buying groceries in bulk so she doesn't have to go shopping as much. She's enjoying the fresh air when she accidentally pushes a motorcycle over, causing a chain reaction of motorcycles to fall. Oh no. So, we know where this is going. The motorcycles belong to a group of thugs, and they drag Shion into a back alley, threatening to hurt her if she doesn't pay for the damages. Unlike Heiichi in Chapter 2, however, Shion isn't scared at all, because Shion has a secret weapon she can use should she need to, an illegally modified stun gun. She also knows that this alley is a shortcut that people from Hinamizawa often use to get home, so it's only a matter of time before someone notices her and defends her, thinking she's Mion. She toys with them a little bit, putting on a tough girl, getting scared sort of facade, but before she can really freak them out, they get interrupted.
Cut it out! Don't you see her crying? Stop it!
Oh? Who's this cheeky little guy? That's not someone we recognize. Although the parallel between this scene and the one in the second chapter is striking. Higurashi sets up a lot of parallels throughout its run, and one of them can lead us to this boy's identity. In the second chapter, it was Shion? It's very confusing. Who saved Keiichi from the bikers? If Shion is Mion's equivalent in this scene, then who would be Keiichi's? Who is Keiichi often compared to by the other characters? Ding, ding, ding. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally time. After 4 fucking chapters of constant mentions, I am so pleased to properly introduce you to Satoshi Hojo. He do have that Shota boy energy about him though. Holy moly, makes me just want to pinch his little cheeks. Anyway, the bikers now surround Satoshi, who simply remains silent despite their screaming. Shion thinks it's because he's never used harsh enough language to really yell back, but that'd be the abuse, wouldn't it? The bikers get pissed at him for just glaring and end up kicking the shit out of him. It looked painful, but I knew. It was his victory. Finally, some passersby show up and intervene, and the bikers simply skulk away. Satoshi picks himself off the ground, and embarrassed about the whole thing, Shion does what a Shion does best.
How could you step into a fight you obviously couldn't win? Pick your opponents better next time. That was reckless, not brave.
You're being a little harsh, Mion. You should at least say thank you. I saw you crying.
No, I wasn't crying. That was just an act.
Shion realizes that since he's speaking with such familiarity, he's probably a classmate of Mion's. Since Shion was raised so separately from Mion, most people in Hinamizawa don't even know she exists. She almost wants to tell him that she's not Mion, but she holds her tongue and keeps up the act.
Well, I was just relieved because you seem to have a girly side after all. I thought you'd kick those guys' butts with some crazy martial arts, so I was really surprised when you just started crying.
This is the 80s in Japan, this is the 80s in Japan, restrain the feminist rant, restrain! Satoshi then does something odd. He pats Shion on the head. But this girl is so touch-starved that she immediately falls in love from just this simple little gesture. After talking for a few more minutes, Satoshi makes to leave. Shion wants to go through the motions of meeting a person for the first time and is frustrated that she just has to leave it at that without even knowing his name.
Don't worry, I won't tell anybody you were crying. See you. In school tomorrow, I mean.
Yeah, see you in school.
Later on, Shion calls Mion to ask her about Satoshi. She fills her in on all the sordid details of Satoshi's life, about Satoko and the abusive situation the children find themselves in. So, he must be exhausted too, right? He must be covering for Satoko all the time.
Well, I don't know.
Had I said something wrong? Mion sounded a bit taken aback. So that meant Mion can't tell how he's feeling. Because he's always wearing that blank look. How can she be that insensitive even though she's around him all the time? Shion continues to ask about him, and as she's talking, she realizes that she's already in love with him. She wonders if it was simply because of a stroke on the head. Sis, I'm done for. I became stupid.
What? Why are you laughing in that weird voice?
You wouldn't understand this feeling, sis. When would I see him again? I felt as if my suffocating life had finally grown brighter. So far, it seems as if Shion's new life in Okinomiya is going well, even if she's feeling a little suffocated by the fact that she has to pretend she's Mion whenever she goes out. And now she has a little crush to occupy her time. This section of the story definitely serves to parallel the fun, happy club time sections that the question arcs featured, although now it's more grounded, more rooted in reality. Shion's life isn't perfect, it's not some idealized form of childhood, but she's able to find some happiness in it, especially after being stuck at boarding school for 2 years. Unfortunately, this only serves to make it more heartbreaking when shit goes downhill. For now, though, let's just try to enjoy the happiness while we can. I think that's what people have to do in real life anyway. Shion spends the next however long getting a little verklempt about her living situation and thinking about Satoshi. This might be a crush. I felt a little ridiculous idolizing him in such a romantic way, though. Then one day, out of nowhere, she gets a chance to see him again. She sees him one evening sitting on a swing in the park. Shion remembers to act like Mion and approaches him. She realizes immediately that something is bugging him.
You can talk to me if you want. Maybe I can help.
No, that's okay.
Come on, I owe you one from before, Satoshi-kun. Or maybe you don't think this old man can be of any help. Don't you know how mighty I am?
After wheedling him for a few more minutes, Satoshi finally admits what's wrong. It's nothing to do with his life situation or anything like that, surprisingly. He's just upset that he fucked up his swing at a baseball game. That's right, if you remember correctly from Chapter 3, Satoshi is part of the Little League team that Irie coaches, the Hinamizawa Fighters, which is still just such a dumb name.
What? Are you feeling down just because of that?
Hey, it's not that easy to get over, Mion.
Shion desperately wants to comfort him about it, but that would be out of character for Mion, who isn't always the best with people's emotions. Mion would tell him to keep trying and offer to help him cheat, so that's exactly what Shion does. Eventually, he realizes that she's trying to cheer him up, and he looks less depressed. Once again, Satoshi starts stroking Shion's head. And this girl fucking creams her jeans. New kink unlocked, man. Eventually, he pulls away and tells her that he needs to get going because his aunt wanted him to get some groceries. In order to spend more time with him, Shion claims that she needs to get groceries too. After nearly blowing her cover, as the maids usually do all the shopping for Mion and Oreo, they agree to head off together. Shion quickly discovers that, unlike her initial impression of him, Satoshi is pretty unreliable. Essentially, he's a goddamn space cadet.
Which one is broccoli? The green one or the yellow one?
That's cauliflower, Satoshi-kun. Hey, could it be that you can't tell lettuce from cabbage either?
Satoshi stumbles his way through the grocery store with Shion having to help him at every turn. What a loser! She thinks it's pretty cute though, and you know what? Curse my love of idiot men. Even if she's pretty abrasive about it, Shion gets Satoshi through this whole process successfully.
Good boy. You did a good job. There.
What is it? Don't stroke my head.
I'm rewarding you for shopping successfully today. There.
You're making fun of me, aren't you, Mion?
Hey, I think these two are really cute together. Fuck. I already know how this story ends, but I'll be damned if I didn't get sucked right the fuck in anyway. Curse you, Ryokishi, I'm coming for your stupid fucking hat! Some more time passes, and now we cut to a day of practice for the Hinamizawa Fighters, which is pretty much the only place that Shion can reliably hang out with Satoshi. She's basically acting as their manager, even if she constantly insists that she's not.
We'd be a stronger team if you were our manager, Mion. Why don't you apply? As manager, I mean.
Well, if I feel like it. Anyway, how's Satoshi doing, coach? Is his batting average improving?
By the way, they mean manager here in the Japanese sense, which is pretty common in high school sports where someone, usually a girl, basically acts as an assistant for the team in question. The three discuss for a moment how Satoshi is a really good player, but tends to crumble under pressure. But it's not really a big deal, as the Hinamizawa Fighters aren't really in it to win anyway. They mostly just want to have some fun playing baseball. Then the team breaks in half to do a mock match, and Shion and Irie head off to the bleachers to keep track of the score and watch. Of course, with Shion here, their topic of conversation quickly becomes Satoshi. Shion wonders why he even joined the team in the first place, seeing as he's much more of a bookworm type.
That's because I invited him.
Is that so? You recruited him? Did you notice some sort of hidden talent?
Irie tries to dodge her question for a minute, but this is Shion, so she's very persistent.
I think you might be able to guess.
It is, of course, due to his family situation.
I thought that as long as he concentrated on something else, he could forget about his troubles at home. Satoshi-kun got really sick after his uncle took him into his custody. He had many clinical symptoms, but the causes were unknown.
Satoshi is a little stunted emotionally. Since he had to grow up so quickly, he had little time to express anything childish or immature, so Irie thought to use sports as a way for him to get out that pent-up energy, and for a while it seemed to work. The two also gained a sense of trust between them.
Are you guys close?
I think so. He talks to me about his problems, so I guess that's a sign of trust.
I felt a little jealous of how confidently Irie said that.
Irie confesses, however, that lately he's been worried about Satoshi. He's been missing some practices, and it seems like he hasn't been feeling well again.
Their aunt is bullying Satoko-chan in a terrible way. She's become worn out after all that, and...
So Satoshi-kun is also worn out from covering for Satoko, isn't he?
Shion has never given much thought to Satoko. She wasn't someone who really mattered to her, but now that she's really gotten to know him and sees how his living situation is affecting him...
So I couldn't help but think that his whole life is constantly affected by Satoko. In order to protect Satoko, he always had to step in and suffer. I didn't really know anything about Satoko, but I had to admit, I felt hostile toward her. I felt jealous because she was monopolizing him.
This is a really interesting moment for Shion, and one that will come to define her actions moving forward. Up till this point, we've seen Shion as a manipulator, a little selfish, but ultimately she's been painted as the mature one in comparison to Mion, who is tomboyish and loves playing board games, but now we can start to see both sides of the coin. In truth, it is actually Mion who's the mature sister, and Shion is more childish and self-centered. Even if she knows the situation with Satoshi and Satoko, she can't see Satoko as anything more than an obstacle blocking Satoshi, and by extension herself, from happiness.
Why did Satoshi-kun have to sacrifice so much for her? Just by ignoring her, his stress would melt away. Of course, I knew he couldn't do that.
Even if she admits the truth of the situation, she still gets stuck in her ways of thinking that she knows what's best for Satoshi and what would make him the most happy, regardless of the circumstances surrounding that happiness, regardless of his own feelings on the matter. If it sounds like I'm speaking from experience and Shion's mindset, it's because I am, and it's really not healthy. It's an interesting development for her character, as this character trait is not something to be admired. In fact, Shion is having a pretty awful, toxic series of thoughts. And as we'll soon see, these are thoughts that she is actually going to act upon. So far in this chapter, Shion has been set up as a hero, a good person, even if a little bit flawed. She does truly mean well for Satoshi, even if it's in the most backwards, toxic sort of way. And now we're starting to see how those genuinely good feelings are going to get twisted into something not so good.
Shouldn't we do something about Satoko instead? If Satoko were stronger, Satoshi-kun wouldn't have to deal with stress. I think Satoko is the cause of everything.
Uh-oh. That's not something Mion would say. Shion is slipping. But she admits to herself that above all else, she doesn't want Satoshi to get sick and quit the team because it's the only time she gets to see him. Though she also says that she's never intending to tell him how she feels, she's just satisfied with being at his side, which is just such a fucking anime-ass line.
I want to be with Satoshi-kun. So, I want him to stay on the team. So, I want to get rid of his concerns and his stress. So, what? So, what can I do to achieve all that?
Shion, I'd be careful if I were you. Those are some rather yandere-like sentiments to have, and that's a damn slippery slope. A couple more weeks pass, and Shion returns to the baseball court, but mentions that it's been several weeks since Satoshi stopped showing up to practice entirely. Irie pleads her to stay, since they're having a meeting with the Okinomiya Titans later, but she blows him off.
Maybe I won't be coming back. If you really need a manager, look for somebody else.
Please, do come again, whenever you feel like it. Satoshi-kun will be sad if you're not here when he comes back.
Shion begins to walk home, feeling pretty upset. On top of not being able to see Satoshi, she's barely had any contact with Mion or Kasai, both of whom have started to garner suspicion from the rest of the family, who suspect that they may be in touch with her. As these thoughts are plaguing her, something, or rather someone, unexpected happens.
Mi-chan, hello.
Shion doesn't know who she is, but knows enough to discern her identity based on the fact that there's only one person who calls her sister Mi-chan.
Rena, I'm surprised to see you here.
As per the timeline of this little tale, at this point Rena's still pretty new to town, so Shion doesn't have a lot to go off of as far as her personality goes. So when Rena asks if she wants to walk home together to avoid suspicion, all she can do is agree. Unfortunately, it begins to rain on the way, and the two girls find themselves taking shelter at a bus stop.
I was worried about you, 'cause you look so down. Do you feel lonely because Satoshi-kun is avoiding us?
Rena gives her some words of encouragement, telling her to smile, because if Mion, the carefree, happy club president, isn't smiling, then who's going to?
Sis told me she was a funny girl with a few bad habits, but she seemed to have another very mature side to her.
Rena asks if Shion, whom she probably thinks is Mion, you can never tell with Rena, loves Satoshi, and even surprising herself, Shion says yes.
He'll come back after he's done with his part-time job.
His part-time job, huh? I wonder when it'll end.
She doesn't know what Rena is talking about, but we do. Remember? Satoshi had been saving a lot of money right before he dipped, supposedly to buy Satoko a big stuffed bear for her birthday.
Satoko again! How stupid. It would be easier for him to just forget about Satoko.
She's so lost in thought that it startles her when she looks over to see Rena staring at her. Oh my god, wait, what day is it? 4? Holy shit, the answer arcs don't fuck around. We're getting straight to Fucktown!
Do you feel jealous of Satoko-chan because she monopolizes Satoshi-kun?
Hit the nail on the head right down to the wording. Rena has been supernaturally perceptive, but it's getting pretty scary now.
Satoshi-kun told me that he felt tired of protecting Satoko-chan. He was feeling guilty, though.
Shion doesn't think that that's something Satoshi would say, but she still feels like Rena is telling the truth.
Maybe Rena led him to do so. She might be capable of something like that. I don't understand this girl. It suddenly hit me that I was sitting with this creepy girl in a tiny shack. I'd been dragged into her strange world. I don't think Sis has realized Rena's real personality.
It's not because he trusts me. I think it's because I've experienced the same thing. Those footsteps always followed me. They even came to my bedside and looked down at me.
What? Hold on. Let's pause, because this one line brings up several interesting points. Number 1, I think we all know what those footsteps that Rena mentioned are. Most likely they're the ones that followed Keiichi in both the first and third chapters. But what this means is that to some extent, they must be more real than we might have thought, as now we have confirmation that 2 more people have heard them, both of whom have seemingly either gone crazy or disappeared in various timelines. We still have no idea what those footsteps might actually be, but maybe Rena will give us a little more.
Have you ever thought of leaving Hinamizawa? Have you ever thought of doing something like that?
No, I love it here.
You'll be okay. If that's true, Oyashiro-sama won't get mad at you.
I love this place, so I don't think I qualify for Oyashiro-sama's curse.
But I'm not so sure about Satoshi-kun. Satoshi-kun wants to leave Hinamizawa and run far away, even if only unconsciously.
Shion nearly panics at this. If he runs away from Hinamizawa, then she'll truly never get to see him again.
Everything he's going through is a sign of Oyashiro-sama's curse. You feel like someone is watching you from a distance, and it follows you. Then it watches from right behind you. After that, you start hearing an extra footstep. Then Oyashiro-sama keeps watching you even when you're sleeping in the dark, right by your side, waiting silently for you to admit your sin.
Okay, this confirms one thing. Rena has always been fucking nuts. She didn't get driven bananas from the events of Chapter 1. She has literally always been like this. The whole time we have known her. Fuck, I hate this. Satoshi confessed to Rena that he's been having nightmares, which it turns out were identical to her own.
He must have been suspicious at first, but just as I predicted, he started to feel Oyashiro-sama's presence more strongly.
I don't like how it seems like Satoshi only started feeling really bad after he talked to Rena about it. She then explains to Shion that she used to live in Ibaraki, but that Oyashiro-sama started telling her to return to Hinamizawa. But wait a second. Shouldn't Mion already know that she lived in Ibaraki? Rena goes on to state that he's already experiencing Oyashiro-sama's curse because deep down, he wants to leave. The money he's telling himself that he's saving for Satoko, he's actually secretly planning to use to get out of town.
He's been struggling with himself. Thinks he's working to please Satoko on her birthday. He also feels that he might be deceiving himself because he unconsciously wants to skip town with that money.
Shion kind of freaks out. She doesn't really know what Rena is talking about, but one thing does stick. Satoshi is experiencing Oyashiro-sama's curse. This means that he might disappear. The Watandagashi festival is right around the corner, after all. Shion is a woman of action, so her first thought is to ask herself what she can do to prevent this. To that end, when she gets home, she calls Mion despite the danger. She asks her to switch places with her one more time. Mion agrees, but when she asks what for, she gets an answer that neither she nor us like very much.
I'm going to your school.
Great. There's no way this goes horribly wrong.
I'm not sure this place can be called a school, because there are so many different age groups. It's like a kindergarten and an elementary school blended together.
But Shion's primary concern isn't the school. Seeing Satoshi, she sees just how exhausted he looks. Same goes for Satoko.
Mion will only let me have this one day. I should probably talk to Satoshi-kun. About what? Anything goes. Cheer him up, sympathize with him. More than anything, I just wanted to chat with him.
However, Mion mentioned to Shion over the phone that Satoshi's been very reticent with her lately, so just going up and talking might not be the best idea. So does Shion listen to this advice? What do you think?
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. Is there anything else?
Yeesh. Yeah, he's definitely pissed at Mion for some reason. If you put your thinking cap on, you might already have a hunch why. Shion tries desperately to keep up a conversation with him, but he shuts her down at every turn, making repeatedly harsh remarks. She even asks him to come back to play baseball, but he refuses. By this point, Shion is crying.
Why?
Because I'm busy with work. Isn't it obvious?
No, I didn't mean that. Why do you hate me so much?
Why don't you ask yourself?
Holy shit, what happened here? What happened to Satoshi, and specifically between Satoshi and Mion that we missed? Satoshi turns and walks away, and Shion notices someone else crying in the classroom. She enters, and it turns out to be Satoko, who is sobbing for her Nini for the simple problem of dropping her bento box. This, for pretty obvious reasons, pisses Shion the hell off. She literally does the anime head grab and throws Satoko against a wall. Holy shit, dude, you just, broke every bone in her body. When all Satoko does is continue to sob and huddle in a corner, Shion proceeds to start throwing things at her. At this point, Rika hears the commotion and gets in between Shion and Satoko.
Please don't hurt her. She's in a poor situation, so please don't hurt her.
It doesn't matter how pathetic she is. She shouldn't rely on Satoshi-kun all the time. Satoshi-kun has to suffer so much because of her.
But Rika still won't get out of her way. So Shion grabs a chair and hoists it over her head. She has the thought that if she throws it, she'll really hurt them.
I didn't care what the consequences would be. I didn't care if I hurt them.
And then Satoshi finds them. He body slams Shion into a locker and rushes over to help Satoko.
What's going on, Mion? What did Satoko do to deserve this? What did we do? Why do we always have to suffer like this? Why? Why?
He rushes up to Shion and grabs her by the neck. Shion still tries to respond to his question anyway.
I know you feel she's a burden on you. If she were stronger, you wouldn't have to suffer. She's the one to blame.
What the hell do you know about us? You persecuted our parents and now it's us? That's the way of the Sonozaki family, huh? Is it fun? Is it fun bullying us, huh?
Stop it!
Suddenly, Rena breaks the two of them up, immediately diffusing the situation by succinctly explaining each of their sides. Holy shit, she's good at this. These two were just about to tear each other's throats out, and within about 5 seconds, she's got them shaking hands and apologizing. She even gets Shion to apologize to Satoko, too. Class will start in a minute, but Shion gets lost in thought, immediately regretting how she lost control.
I regretted it. I hated myself for it. I couldn't blame myself enough. My world had been torn apart. I wished the sky would fall and kill me.
Well, at least she's starting to realize that maybe, just maybe she might be the problem here. Later that evening, she calls Mion and explains the whole situation, and Mion takes it surprisingly well.
You know, I'm busy with festival preparations, but you certainly made things more complicated.
So I won't get a chance to trade spots for a while?
Hey, I think you should be more aware of the hassle I have to go through.
Shion realizes again that she's being kind of an asshole. Thinking back on her actions that day, something sticks out in her mind. Satoshi really seemed to blame the Sonozaki family for what they did to his parents and them, but how come he never expressed any of this before? It seemed like they had been good friends until recently. She asks Mion if she thinks he's holding a grudge.
I think so, yes. It was was our family that initiated the persecution of the Hojo family, making them into scapegoats.
But why now? Why is he only expressing that grudge to us now?
If Satoshi had just been cold to Shion in the first place, then she wouldn't have fallen in love with him and none of this would have happened. Mion thinks it's because Satoshi is a pretty mature person, and Shion responds by sobbing like a little kid and not being able to understand it. This is another moment to express Shion's immaturity, but here she's being directly compared to Satoshi instead of to Mion. She hasn't had an easy life, don't get me wrong, but when compared to Satoshi, when compared to the things that her family did to Satoshi, Shion's had it pretty easy. And it shows. She's been having so much trouble comprehending how he can sacrifice so much for his sister, and how he can hide his true feelings about the Sonozakis. It's pretty heartbreaking, but maybe this all will help Shion herself grow up a little. Okay, who am I kidding? The story's going to go to shit. Instead of thinking logically about the situation, Shion instead picks a new target for her anger, her own family.
They already punished the Hojo couple. Satoshi-kun has nothing to do with this. What did he do to deserve this? What did he do wrong? Answer me! Answer me! Mion! Mion!
Very well. Please take care of the matter. Goodbye.
And she hangs up the phone. A couple of days pass, and Shion has spent most of that time lying around her apartment being depressed. Kasai finally stops by with some food since she's been refusing to cook herself any. She tries to refuse him, but ends up eating mostly to be polite. Awkwardly, she tries to ask Kasai about the situation she's going through, and it turns out that Mion told him all about it.
She said she wanted me to assist you. She looked worried. Your sister's looking out for you. I thought you might want to know how Satoshi Hojo-kun is doing. I've gathered some information. Would you like me to report?
That's not necessary, but since you went through all the trouble, I think I'd better listen.
Kasai tells her more about what's actually going on at the Hojo residence. It seems that Teppei recently fled with his mistress, which is what's put his wife in such an extra foul mood, which she's obviously been taking out on Satoko.
Can't you do something about that aunt? Doesn't anybody talk about punishing her? She's also one of the remaining Hojos, after all.
Of course, Shion's implication here is that she thinks the Sonozakis are behind the murders every year in Watanagashi.
It'd be best for Satoko and her aunt to be the victims. Satoshi-kun will be freed from every source of his worries all at once.
He'll also be entirely alone in the world and have lost the one person that means everything to him, but let's not worry about that. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Kasai, do you know if this year's victim has been selected already?
Shion-san, I don't know anything about that matter.
Damn. I hope Satoko and her aunt will go missing this year. Hey, Kasai, I just thought of that. Aren't you going to do something about it?
Shion-san, you must be joking.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Of course, there's no way Shion could ever imitate the hag like that. She loses herself in thoughts about how the hag must be behind the murders every year, and if how she was smart she'd make it the aunt and Satoko this year, and at some point falls asleep. Later that afternoon, a phone call wakes her up. She thinks it must be Kasai again, but once again, the person on the other end surprises her.
I'm calling from a payphone, so I'll make it quick. Satoshi called me.
She says that he sounded like he wanted to apologize for the other day, so she asks Shion to take the call instead. She gives her Satoshi's phone number and hangs up. As soon as she's able, Shion makes the call.
I heard the dial tone. 3 times, 4 times. And there he was.
Hojo residence.
He sounded like an adult. His voice sounded a bit tired, too. But it definitely was the voice I loved.
It takes Shion a while to speak, but when she does, she's delighted to hear that Satoshi doesn't sound cold anymore like he did the other day. He apologizes again to her, and she responds in kind.
I won't forgive those people who forced us into this situation. You might be close to them, but it was never you personally. So, I wanted to apologize.
No, please don't apologize. I was selfish and didn't try to understand your situation very well.
My god, some self-awareness! They talk for a minute. It turns out that Satoshi quit his part-time job now that he's got the money he needs for Satoko's birthday present, and so now talk naturally turns to her.
Satoko can't take it anymore. I mean, I wanted to have fun for one night. The Watanagashi festival is tomorrow, isn't it? I want you to take her there.
Oh shit. Oh no. Oh shit. This is exactly what Mion told Keiichi that Satoshi said to her in Chapter 3. That was on an entirely different timeline than this one, so that time he probably did actually say it to Mion, but now, here, he's saying it to Shion instead. Of course, Shion already suspects why he's asking her to take Satoko, because he might disappear.
I know it's it's ridiculous to ask for your help after that incident, but you're the only person I can turn to now.
Okay, but just for tomorrow. All right?
I hope you'll keep looking after her.
What are you saying? I won't do that. Just for tomorrow. They talk about menial things for a little longer, but before he hangs up, Satoshi asks Shion just one more thing.
You don't believe in it, right? In Oyashiro-sama's curse, those who abandon the village and try to run away get cursed by Oyashiro-sama, right?
That's the rule. What's with that suddenly? Are you planning to leave?
I'm not thinking about that anymore.
Well, that's confirmation that at one point, at least, he was planning on running away. I think I can see the situation now. Satoshi is panicking because he thinks that Oyashiro-sama's curse got put on him since he was thinking about running away, but even if he's not anymore, he still seems to be under its effects, which is making him think he's going to get demoned away. He asks her again if she believes in the curse, and Shion of course denies it. Satoshi claims that he won't fall victim to the curse, and not until he gets that damn teddy bear.
I said, put the bunny back in the box.
Finally, his aunt is home, so he has to hang up.
I'll leave Satoko to you. Forget what I said. Bye.
And now for something a little different. This is the first chapter in the entire game, sans a couple of really short sections here or there, that really breaks with the previously established formula. Up till this point, we've exclusively been in a close first-person perspective, meaning that we as the audience are not privy to any scenes or information that our POV character is not. This all changes here, because, see, the thing is, Shion doesn't go to the Watanagashi festival this year. And yet, there's a lot of shit that goes down in and around it. A lot of shit that we really want to know about. Because, see, the thing is that even if Shion is the main character of this chapter, we already know some things about the situation this year, and especially next year, as we'll get into, of course, that she doesn't. So that close first person that we've been relying on already isn't an option. So now Ryokishi takes that opportunity to watch this tragedy from a more omniscient, outside perspective. And let me tell ya, it's about time. Throughout this section, we get updates on the date, which is always June 20th, and the time, which always varies slightly. We're going to go through this chronologically, and the specific times don't really matter, so we're going to breeze past them a bit. Okay, this is going to go a little fast, so strap in. First, we get an update from Shion that afternoon. She still doesn't feel like doing much of anything, so has entrusted the actual Mion with Satoko and has decided to just watch TV all day, getting that self-care and such. Then we cut to Tamae Hojo, the aunt of Satoko and Satoshi. The narration explains that she's so bitter because she imagines that the villagers still hated her after the fallout with her sister. This wasn't the case, of course, but since she acted cold to them, they did the same in return, thus perpetuating her thought process. At the same time, her husband began his affair. Their marriage broke down, and all of this at once has caused Tamae to become very bitter and take her anger out on Satoko. This doesn't necessarily excuse her behavior, but it at least adds some additional context about her motivations in this situation. The only reason that she and her husband agreed to take the kids in the first place is apparently because their parents had a lot of money. Satoshi had no idea they'd even had that much money, so he speculates that they got it from the government for their efforts to protest the damn protest, as it were. Meanwhile, we cut over to where the Watanagashi is starting. Rena, the newcomer, is causing a big splash, and everyone but Satoko seems to be having a good time. Rika tries to comfort her, but Satoko isn't really having any of it. Until, that is, Rika asks her a strange question.
So, Satoko, if your suffering ends today, will you smile? Satoko, it's already been decided.
After Rika echoes the words she said back in the 4th chapter, we cut away to exactly what she was talking about in a lovely little transition that I just really wanted to draw attention to.
Satoshi snuck out the window after supper. On that night, the small village seemed especially desolate. He was barefoot, but started running without hesitation. He felt as though he'd become a wild animal, running on his bare feet. He got the impression that he could run faster than usual.
Hey, gang! This language, it's sounding a little too familiar for comfort, isn't it? I mean, we already knew who the culprit of the 4th year was, but that wonderful sense of dread should be hitting you like a truck right now, am I right? I don't want to see this happen, especially after learning how kind of a person Satoshi really is, because look, Keiichi was always a bit of a jackass. A lovable one, but his actions make some sort of logical sense for his character. With Satoshi, it's insane to think that he would normally even consider something like this. And yet we've seen just how far he's been pushed, how he might think that this is his only solution for a situation, and doesn't it just fucking suck? Meanwhile, we cut back to the Watanagashi, where a raffle is currently underway to wrap up the evening. Originally, the prizes were very modest, but Oryo wouldn't have that, and so she took it upon herself to buy better prizes. She's very grouchy about it. Yet even if he offers, she won't allow Kimiyoshi to reimburse her from the festival fund.
Buffoon! No point in reimbursing that. It was never about the money. Idiots.
You guys, you have no idea how happy I am that Alamis is back. I can't voice old women to save my life. Just then, one of the committee members bursts into the tent and conveys something to Kimiyoshi, who in turn immediately tells Oryo.
Ain't unexpected. What happens thrice will happen a fourth time. It's just another hassle.
The committee member tells them that the police are trying to identify the body, which, yeah, looks like they found Satoshi's handwork. In another great transition, we cut directly to the aforementioned body. And guess who it is? It's him! My boy!
How's it going over there? Did you find something that could identify the body?
Yep. Of course, Oishi is the first officer on the scene, along with his partner Kumagai, whom I have left unvoiced, and let me tell you, that decision is making it increasingly harder to cut around his dialogue. Anyway, looks like they have called Dr. Irie to try to help identify the body, and as usual, it seems that he and Oishi have a somewhat tumultuous relationship.
You must have drunk a lot at the festival, Doctor. Are you sure you're sober? Maybe I should run a breathalyzer test on you, just to be safe.
I'm fine. My assistant is driving.
Clever of you. Hey, let the doctor pass.
He has trouble looking at the body, but perseveres. It appears that the victim's entire face has been smashed in, although it seems that the victim actually lost consciousness after the first blow.
The culprit seems to have flipped the victim over in order to smash her face, even though by that point her death was certain.
He concludes that this was a crime of passion, not inaccurately. Irie claims that he doesn't know who the victim is, although it's pretty clear that he really does, and he's trying to cover for Satoshi, and Oishi knows it. A little later, the police call Satoshi to the scene of the crime. He explains his family situation to the cops, and when the police ask him if he knows anyone who might have a grudge against her, he says he doesn't. They have Kumagai give him a ride home, despite Satoshi's objections, but before he leaves, Oishi tells him one last thing.
Don't worry. It's no problem. We'll catch the culprit soon.
Do you have any leads?
Yes, we do.
Satoshi asks a couple more probing questions, and Oishi responds by giving him more non-answers before they part ways. Finally, we cut back to Shion, who gets a call from Mion the morning after about the murder.
Maybe I should have celebrated, but I wasn't in the mood for some reason.
Of course, they both suspect that Satoshi is the murderer and that the police are also onto him. Shion initially tells Mion to make up an alibi for him, but that won't work as Mion hasn't prepared enough to make that alibi stick. She clearly learns for the next year. On another subject, it seems like Mion wants an excuse to go missing for a day, so she tells Shion that she should go to work that day. Shion reluctantly agrees and gets a ride from Kasai, who's been staying in the apartment next door. However, about halfway there, she sees something out of the car window that makes her abandon the idea of working.
Pedestrians passed by in front of the car. I was startled to see that one of them looked like Satoshi-kun. It was him.
Shion tells Kasai to tell her uncle she can't actually work that day and hops out of the car after him. She catches up to him and is pleased to see that even if he looks tired, it seems that he's happy about something.
He looked worn out, but satisfied. Like he had accomplished something great. That was the mood I sensed from him. So, I was convinced. The one who killed that wicked aunt who tormented Satoko? It was him.
So she decides to avoid the subject altogether. It turns out that he's heading to the toy store to see if the teddy bear is still there. He won't get his final paycheck until a couple of days from now, so he can't buy it until then. So Shion goes with him, bringing up the idea of reserving the bear. Luckily, the bear is still there, so they go inside, where the store seems a little abandoned.
Nice. Maybe you can get it without paying.
No, Mion. Stealing is bad.
Eventually, the owner realizes they're there and agrees to reserve the bear for Satoshi. All seems to be going well, for once. But of course, everyone say it with me now, this is Higurashi. As soon as they exit the store, they're confronted by, who else? Oishi and a posse of officers.
Oh, Oishi-san, thank you for working hard for our safety. Oh, the four of you want something from this toy store? A doll, maybe?
Obviously, it's really Satoshi-kun they want. Shion tries to protest them, taking him to the station, but Satoshi simply freezes up. She once again curses Mion for not setting up a proper alibi for him.
If he was taken to the station and grilled by Oishi, he'd confess in a minute. Somebody had to protect him. Nobody had ever been there for him. I had to step up now.
But she's at a loss. What alibi can she create for him? Oishi gets more pushy, stepping towards them, and Satoshi takes a step back. It's getting desperate. Oishi tries to reach out to grab Satoshi's shoulder, and that's the moment Shion loses it.
Do you want to know his alibi?
That's right. I want to know Hojo-san's alibi. We must not be doing our jobs. We can't seem to confirm his whereabouts at the time of the crime.
You don't have to ask him. I can confirm his alibi. He was with me. Wouldn't that be enough?
But Mion was at the Watanagashi with her friends. Oishi saw her there.
Are you still saying that you were with him? Isn't that a little hard to believe, Mion Sonozaki-san?
I'm not Mion Sonozaki. I didn't go to the Watanagashi festival in the first place. Satoshi-kun and I were talking at a restaurant in Okinomiya at that time.
Oh my god. She's a genius. She's using her real identity to create an alibi for Satoshi. She's going to pay for this later, but it's a fucking brilliant move.
I'm Shion Sonozaki, Mion's twin sister. Pleasure to meet you, Oishi-san.
I didn't know that Mion Sonozaki-san had a twin sister. Are you trying to fool me?
Not at all. Why don't you check my family register, or whatever? Should I call sis?
Like a good liar once told me, all the best lies are built on truths. The police, of course, now want to question her too, to get to the bottom of this. She agrees readily, then turns to Satoshi, telling him to only tell them what she just said. He looks very confused.
Are you upset? Because I've been fooling you.
I finally understand why you were weird sometimes in class. I've been thinking it was a bit strange. So, this isn't the first time we've met, is it?
More than upset, he just seems perplexed. He asks Shion what character she uses to write her name, and she obliges.
Shion. Huh. That's a beautiful name.
Okay, this section is where the story starts to get a bit intense, so I ask that you bear with me. There's a lot of screaming, so you'll have to forgive me if my voice gets a little hoarse. Me? Write an ominous opening? What are you talking about? The police split up Shion and Satoshi and question them separately. Oishi doesn't even talk to her, just leaves her with Kumagai. Eventually, he gets a phone call and Shion is let go. Alone. Apparently, someone has come to pick her up. With a sinking feeling, Shion thinks she knows who it is.
The hag had probably heard about me by now, since I revealed my real identity to the police. I couldn't hide any longer. I was going to receive some form of punishment.
Sure enough, there's a black car waiting for her just outside the police station, along with some of her father's grunts. She tries to ask where Kasai is, as he would also be held responsible for helping her, but they don't respond, just shove her in the back of the car and sit on opposite sides of her so she can't escape. Of course, they take her directly to the Sonozaki main house, where Mion is the only person to greet her. Shion is surprised by her coldness, but Mion has to protect herself.
It's been a while, Shion. I never expected to see you other than at New Year's. It's a pleasure to see you again, Mion-sama.
Oh, she dropped that sama. That hurts my soul.
Our leader is deeply upset. I wonder how you'll explain yourself.
They then take Shion into the woods, where, of course, the Sonozaki torture bunker is. Wow, that's a sentence I never thought I'd say. Shion briefly wonders if they're taking her down there to kill her, as they were originally supposed to all those years ago. The room they lead her into is odd and bisected. On one side is a lounge area, which is currently filled with high-ranking Sonozaki family members, including her own mother, and the other side is tiled, with strange devices hanging off the walls. After a minute, Shion recognizes them for what they are. Torture devices.
Damned fool! How dare you return!
Oryo is absolutely pissed and cusses out Shion for a solid minute, but what stuns Shion is that the hag is actually not upset with her for ditching school. No, what is really getting her bloomers in a bundle is the fact that Shion covered for Satoshi, a Hojo.
He has nothing to do with that. I understand that his parents were ostracized, but he shouldn't be.
Shut the hell up!
She continues to slander the Hojo family, which only serves to piss Shion off, so she opens her big fat mouth again.
Who the hell do you think you're talking to?
Shut the fuck up! Let me finish!
Holy shit, Shion, you are not good at making things easier on yourself, are you?
What the fuck
do you know about Satoshi-kun? How could you talk about him like he's some pest when you don't know anything about him? How fucking stupid is that? Is even your brain archaic or what? You hate the fact that a Sonozaki is with a Hojo that much? That's not stupid. That's beyond stupid. She replies that the real sticking point here is that Oreo is upset she fell in love with a Hojo. Shion screams out how much she loves him and how is that so wrong, but Mion approaches her and whispers,
Shion, I know how you feel, but you can't go back after coming this far. You have to pay for what you did.
What did I do? Why me? That's ridiculous.
You're probably right, but this is Hinamizawa. And you were the twin sister of the successor, Mion Sonozaki.
We haven't agreed on that matter ever since I came back. You're full of this reputation shit. Hinamizawa? The Sonozakis? So what? I don't give a fuck about— Listen! How many people did you depend on to start your new life in Okinomiya? Oh shit. Mion then tells her that Kasai is in a cell in the back, along with Yoshiro. She then asks Shion to consider that their lives are on the line here as well as her own. Yet it is only at the mention of Satoshi potentially suffering as well that forces Shion to finally apologize to Oreo.
I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me.
So, Shion, how do you propose to pay for this?
Pay? What do you want me to do?
This whole scene, as you'll soon see, is a battle that Shion has with herself more than with the Sonozaki family. Here we see the conflict that has been building since the beginning of the chapter come to a boiling point. Shion has to reckon with herself how her actions affect other people and come to terms with the fact that she has to consider the other people in her life as more than just objects for her own satisfaction. Because at heart, Shion has always been incredibly self-centric. Now, I use that term specifically instead of selfish because the latter implies malicious intent, whereas self-centric simply means that she finds it difficult to even rationalize how she can impact other people in her life. And this isn't a diss on her. Shion is a teenager. Most teenagers are pretty self-centric. You kind of have to be at that age to figure out yourself and who you are before you can start to consider other people. I was certainly kind of a douche canoe at that age, and most other people are too. But what will determine the direction her character goes from here is whether she will use this opportunity to grow and learn that weakness about herself or reject it entirely. Opportunity, in this case, meaning getting her fingernails peeled off her fingers. A device is taken off the wall and placed in front of Shion. It resembles a giant nail clipper, except with the sort of beak at the end that you're supposed to place under your fingernail. By strapping your finger in and hitting a lever, the beak will rip the fingernail straight off your hand.
Each fingernail represents one of your responsibilities. Shion Sonozaki, no matter which ones you choose, you must remove 3 nails yourself.
All in all, there are so many worse things they could be doing to her. Shion realizes that they're letting her off easy. Yet she still struggles to hit that lever.
This punishment exists to offer payment in exchange for the safety of those who helped me. If I refused, they would suffer. It was my selfish desire to get away from that school. Why did Kasai have to suffer because of that? Why did Uncle Yoshiro have to suffer just because he provided me with a job? I knew that the hag and the other relatives still hated the Hojos, so I didn't know what they'd do to Satoshi-kun if I didn't do this. Would they tell him to remove his fingernails in exchange for forgiving me? He'd do it. He'd sacrifice himself with no hesitation to save others.
Shion psychs herself up. It's just 3 fingernails. She can do this. Don't be a pussy. When Shion is finally able to look, she describes the state of her fingernail as being opened like the hood of a car. Yeesh. She is in a lot of pain, and her false bravado from earlier quickly breaks into abject begging.
Mion, look. Isn't this enough? It really hurts. You know that? You see that in my eyes, don't you?
Shion, you can't keep going?
I'll do it. This is easy. You sadist. This doesn't scare me. This doesn't hurt.
She quickly moves her next finger into position, but in her haste, she fucks it up. She only chips off the end of her nail, but the pain is just as bad as if she'd ripped the whole thing off.
Did I have to continue removing the nail from my ring finger? That much pain? Again? Again?
Shion?
No.
I don't want to do it. I can't take it anymore. It's too painful. Forgive me, please. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry. Mion approaches her again and tells her to hang in there, but Shion refuses, and so Mion's subordinates blindfold her and do the job themselves. No! Mom! Help me! Mom! Ah! But no one comes to help Shion, and she passes out. She failed this test. I now feel no remorse in calling her selfish. Of course, by real-world standards, one could forgive her for this, as getting your fingernails ripped off is apparently one of the worst sorts of pain you can imagine. But we can't judge her by real-world standards. Rather, we must judge her by narrative ones. The story just put her on trial, asked her to rectify her hypocrisy, and Shion has chosen an answer. She is, at heart, utterly selfish. And now, she's about to receive her real punishment for it. 3 days passed, most of which Shion spends sleeping or staring at the ceiling. Her hand is all gross and swollen, but she's not really concerned about that. Luckily, they didn't hurt Kasai, and Yoshiro is hopefully alright as well.
I'm sure he's alright, because he's strong. Even so, you should apologize to him.
Okay. Of course, Shion spends the vast majority of her time actually worried about Satoshi. Kasai comes around to some food. He seems worried about her.
I got a call from Mion-san yesterday. She was saying she called you a few times, but never got through.
He then goes on to tell her what Mion called to say, that Shion has been forgiven. She will be withdrawn from St. Lucia's and attend a school in Okinomiya. The only caveats being that she has to stay away from Hinamizawa, she will no longer pretend to be Mion, and for the time being she has to stay out of the public eye. This brings Shion some relief, but of course she has to ask about Satoshi.
Shion-san, the family wants you to forget about him.
They don't want a Hojo with a Sonozaki. Shion runs through all the ways she could potentially get around this to see him, like if he were joined the baseball team, or if she called him and asked him to meet her. Yet if she gets caught, he would be in more danger than she would. Wow, for once she's thinking about someone other than herself. Too bad it's only her slightly obsessive crush and not like, the guy who just brought her lunch and nearly just got punished for helping her. Shion tells Kasai that she's going to take a walk. Her destination? The toy store. She goes to see if the teddy bear is gone. Yep, sure enough. It's gone from the window.
Congrats, Satoshi-kun. Looks like you were able to buy it. There was nobody left to hurt him. He was free from his tiresome efforts. Over time, he'd retrieve his smile. But I wouldn't be there with him.
Just then, a car horn honks, breaking her out of her thoughts. It turns out to be Irie.
Sonozaki-san, long time no see.
It seems he's come to see if that teddy bear is gone too. Hopefully Satoshi won't have to work so hard after this.
Did he turn in his resignation to the Hinamizawa fighters?
Oh, does that even exist? I never received one. Did you, Sonozaki-san? So that means he still belongs to the team. I think he'll be back after things have settled down, but I know he'll be sad if he doesn't see you there.
Shion realizes then that she doesn't have to hide her identity anymore, so she comes clean to Irie. He's surprised, but takes it pretty well.
I never realized that Mion-san had a twin sister?
Same here.
Welp, here he comes again. Time to cause some mischief. He and Irie obviously don't like each other, so Irie offers to give Shion a ride so she can get away, as it seems like he's here for her. She almost goes with him, but it seems like Aoishi really has something to talk to her about. He also knows about her fingernails, even though that would be a Sonozaki secret.
I don't mind you talking, but I won't talk back.
Yes, that'd be fine. You can just listen and I'll talk. You can just listen to an old man ramble while sipping on a cup of coffee.
Shion decides that she'd better hear what he has to say, so she hops into the back of Aoishi's car, and of course he drives her straight to the police station. Surprisingly, he doesn't take her to an interrogation room, but rather just to a couch in one of the offices. Oishi beats around the bush for a few minutes, and Shion almost leaves a couple of times.
Shion-san, I did want to get Satoshi-san's alibi from you. I admit it. But Shion-san, what I want to ask you about is his alibi for yesterday, not the day of the murder.
What does that have to do with his aunt's death?
It's because Satoshi has been missing since then.
Of course he has. We know he has. We know that he never managed to give Satoko that teddy bear. But now we do know that someone bought it. Maybe it really was him. Oishi retreads the same story we know, that on the day Satoshi withdrew all his savings from his bank account, he disappeared and someone resembling him was seen at Nagoya Station. Shion protests, claiming that no one else could have bought that teddy bear, so how could he have run away? She puzzles her way through the scenario and realizes that something must have interrupted him on his way home after buying the bear. She knows that he would only have run away after giving Satoko her present if he was really that resigned to being caught. So the only conclusion is that someone else made him disappear.
Was Satoshi-kun eliminated?
That's really stupid, old man! She laughs hysterically, trying to keep her heart from freezing entirely. Oishi tells her that he has a hypothesis and for her to just listen to him and not interrupt. He thinks that he killed his aunt, obviously, and after that...
You were forbidden from having a relationship with Satoshi-kun, weren't you? I believe the reason behind that is not that your family hated the Hojos, but that they didn't like the fact that you were involved with a murder suspect.
That is actually possible.
I believe that your family knew that a few threats would never be enough for you to break ties with Satoshi-kun. So, their only option would be to do something about the other person, wouldn't it?
Shion panics about this, but Oishi explains that he thinks the Sonozakis are the ones that told Satoshi to get out of town. They bought the teddy bear before he could, and then told him to use that money to get out of town, and that they would take care of Satoko while he was gone. All of this most likely would have been orchestrated by Mion.
But that meant he's alive. I should be able to see him again someday. He must be coming back, so I'll definitely see him again.
It appears that they found the murderer of Satoshi-kun's aunt.
It's now been a couple of weeks since the whole Satoshi affair went down, and this is the first news Shion has heard since then.
Don't worry, it doesn't seem like it's Satoshi-kun. I heard it was a lunatic who was aiming to continue the series of mysterious deaths.
Weird. That's really weird. We haven't even seen this guy, and now he's confessing to killing someone entirely random, apparently in order to imitate the yearly murders? Shion doesn't buy it.
I was convinced that Satoshi-kun killed her. I thought that was the reason he had to disappear. Satoshi-kun's case had become one of those mysterious deaths. I didn't like the way that sounded, because it was as though the curse had swallowed Satoshi-kun.
She goes to meet with Oishi to see if he's heard anything, but he can't even confirm whether he actually took the train from Nagoya or not.
Really? I was convinced Satoshi-kun was the real culprit. It was rather surprising for me, too.
Apparently, he received a call from the prefectural office that some crazy druggie claimed responsibility for the murder and new information that only the killer could have. But before they could even really talk to him more, he choked on a spork that they used in the prison cafeteria and died, which frankly seems rather convenient to me. Oishi confesses to Shion that he doesn't buy this one bit, and even though he doesn't have any evidence, Satoshi's disappearance convinced him that he's the culprit. He asks Shion if she's heard anything from inside the Sonozaki family, which of course she hasn't.
Alright, how about this? Why don't we make a deal? Gentleman's deal.
He wants them to work together, to tell each other anything they learn about Satoshi's disappearance. Even if Oishi wants to bring the culprit to justice and Shion wants to protect him, they both want the same thing at this moment, to find him.
Outside the window, I could see normal life taking its course, but Satoshi-kun wasn't there. He should have been there, but he wasn't. I was so scared that I might grow used to his absence someday.
Do you know what they're calling his disappearance in Hinamizawa? They say that he was demoned away.
Shion thinks that's ridiculous, to count his case among those of Oyashiro-sama's curse. And yet, hadn't Rena told her that was the case? That he was already under the effects of the curse before he ran away? In order to find some answers, Shion heads to the library to gather her thoughts.
I'd been viewing each incident as a separate case. I've never looked at all the cases as part of one big scheme.
She puts together the pieces that we ourselves have mostly already managed, including the fact that the perpetrators are slowly broadening their scope of who's considered to have angered Oyashiro-sama. She wonders if Satoshi's case might not be so unrelated after all. Like, what if someone put the idea into his head to murder his aunt on that day?
Would he really have considered murdering his aunt, even if it was to protect his sister? Couldn't it have been possible for somebody to have chosen the aunt as the fourth year's murder beforehand? And they used Satoshi-kun?
Maybe Satoshi's disappearance had nothing to do with their relationship. Maybe it was all part of some big conspiracy. To an outsider, Shion might appear to be kind of losing it, but by this point, I think we know better.
What is that curse? Specifically, what kind of god is Oyashiro-sama?
She scribbles sentences repeatedly and gets so into her madness mantra that she doesn't notice someone standing behind her until it's too late to get away.
I'm sorry. Did I startle you? Are you Shion Sonozaki-san?
She must be someone who knows some things since she knows that Shion exists in the first place. Regardless, like most people, Shion is a bit perturbed by this woman. She makes a move, but Takano blocks her.
Oh, are you upset?
I like to be alone when thinking, so I'm moving to another spot. Excuse me.
That's a shame. I thought we'd be good friends. I finally met someone with the same passion. A fellow researcher of Oyashiro-sama's curse.
Because, of course, if you'll remember, that was Takano's main shtick. Shion is at first a little disturbed that she looked at her notes, but begins to listen to her more attentively when she brings up the idea that there are 2 victims every year, one who dies and one who goes missing, which is a piece of the puzzle Shion hadn't put together quite yet.
I really would have enjoyed a conversation with you, but I think you prefer being alone.
I'm sorry I wasn't respectful, Mio-san. Please, call me Shion.
Takano giggles again. They reintroduce themselves, then sit down to talk. Shion claims that she's researching the curse to catch up on the things she missed while away at boarding school, and then turns the questions to Takano. She tells Shion about her research into Onigafuchi village. Again, this is mostly repeat information that we don't really need to hear again. She then goes on about the original meaning of Watanagashi, and for the first time we hear the term Cannibal Banquet, which is now going to be the name of my future death metal band. But before she can infodump literally everything she knows into Shion, someone calls her from the door to the library, presumably Tomatake, and Takano decides to leave Shion her scrapbooks. We haven't really had the time to talk about Takano yet, because honestly, I'm still really confused. What is her deal? She seems to have kind of a similar role in the story as Oishi, becoming involved right before shit starts to go down and giving the main characters valuable information that only an adult can know. However, she's kind of the polar opposite of Oishi. Oishi comes across as pleasant and kind, but can really be kind of ruthless, whereas Takano frankly comes off as pretty creepy, but seems to only bring information to the protagonist without the added baggage of sometimes suspecting them to be murderers. However, she also seems to be partially responsible sometimes for what occurs. Like, she really should have known that sneaking into the ritual storehouse is prime grounds for getting offed, and yet she offers to bring teenagers in with her. That seems kind of irresponsible, don't you think? And here she is in the library getting teenagers involved in her shenanigans once again.
Why did Satoshi-kun have to disappear? What was he involved in? How did that happen? Maybe Takano's notes would bring me the answer.
Eventually, the library has to close, and after reading Takano's notes all day, Shion heads back to her apartment. Shortly after she arrives, she hears a knock on the door. She assumes it's Kasai, but she's surprised when the door opens.
My alter ego, Mion Sonozaki, appeared. She was holding a box of cake, while smiling timidly.
The peace offering is accepted, and the two chat for a while while eating the cake. Shion comments on how different Mion is when she's not acting the role of successor. Ultimately, she forgives her for what she did because if she was in her shoes, she would have done exactly the same. Mion asks her about her fingernails and starts apologizing.
Okay, apology accepted, but if you apologize one more time, that will be cancelled.
Huh? What do you mean?
Once you start apologizing, you never stop, so I'm cutting you off.
Will you really forgive me? About Satoshi-kun as well? Even if her heart aches at the mention, she's willing to let it go.
I wonder where Satoshi-kun disappeared to, though. I said that I'd forgiven her completely, but that promise instantly evaporated, just because of what she said. I felt like I turned into a completely different person.
Okay, never mind. Of course, this pisses off Shion because she still thinks that Mion is intimately involved with his disappearance. Mion sees Shion's expression change and begins apologizing again. Shion vows to herself that right then and there, she's going to make Mion talk.
I really don't know what happened to Satoshi-kun. Please believe me. That's a lie. Are you saying that Oyashiro-sama's curse demoned him away? You guys, Demon Satoshi-kun away! You and the Sonozaki family! Give him back to me! Give him back! I wasn't speaking of my own will anymore. It was the demon who was controlling me. The demon that had been sleeping deep inside me woke up and was speaking through my mouth. She grabs Mion by the neck and begins to squeeze. But then, she happens to look down at Mion's hand as she grabs onto her. 3 of her fingernails look exactly like Shion's. She too has been punished. Whether by the family or she did it to herself is not confirmed. Since I found out you love Satoshi-kun, I really wanted you to be happy. I told Granny to leave you and Satoshi-kun alone. I shouted at her. Then she said she'd let you be if you atoned with sincerity. So, you were supposed to live happily with him. Mion swears up and down that neither she nor the Sonozaki family have anything to do with Satoshi-kun's disappearance, and Shion lets go of her neck. Mion, I'm so sorry. Did I hurt you?
Mion says she's alright, and though the demon is still there in her mind, she bullies it into submission, saying that she believes Mion.
It's not the Sonozaki family because Mion says so!
That's stupid, Shion. Are you going to ignore Satoshi-kun's voice?
I know! You don't have to remind me, demon! I can hear his voice!
The demon finally leaves, and the 2 sisters embrace, wishing that life wasn't so complicated, that they didn't have to be demon and human, that they could just be one and the same. Alas, life isn't so easy, especially for them.
We fell asleep while holding each other. While holding everything.
So, that's a scene that kind of deserves a little unpacking. Also, I really had to paraphrase that one, so you might just be better off listening to the whole thing. Not to toot my own horn, since that scene is literally just all me. Okay, so first of all, the big question that I think is on everyone's minds. Shion's sudden personality shift. We've seen her do similar quick turnarounds before, but never to this extent. And there's also the fact that she referred to it as a demon specifically. It's an odd mention, especially the fact that it seems to talk to her in her head? This could just be seen as Shion fighting with herself, as she's been seen to do multiple times, but something about that wording reminds me of something. I'm not quite ready to go into it yet, but just remember that word. Demon. If you've already placed it, then you've already figured out most of the twists of this chapter. If you haven't, well, then I was right there with you, so let's just see how this goes. Before we do, I just want to point out how cool it is that that subtle word can really make a whole fuck ton of pieces fall into place if you catch it. But if you don't, on the reread, it's one of those things that makes you realize that the answer was staring you in the face all along. Higurashi does that a lot in hindsight. I've even indirectly pointed them out before, so even this analysis series is one that might need a rewatch after you've seen it all. After that weirdness, it's time for a time skip. What, you didn't realize that the first more than half of this chapter was just a glorified prologue? Shame on you, it's time for things to get real now. Here's where Chapter 5 is going to start overlapping with Chapter 2 in a big way. It's been just about a year since Satoshi's disappearance, and Shion is getting used to her new life. She did end up living with her parents again, but still keeps the apartment for when she wants to get away or is skipping classes. In fact, she's going out to get groceries right now in preparation to stay there the next week, as her dad is pissed about the aforementioned skipping of classes. Once again, she enjoys the bright day and accidentally hits a motorcycle that's parked where it's not supposed to be. She kicks it, and a whole line of them fall over. Gee, haven't we seen that somewhere before? Just like last time, a group of thugs pull her into an alley and start yelling at her, and Shion considers using her stun gun before deciding against it. And finally, just like last time, Shion tries her fake crying routine.
If I pretended to cry again now, would he come to save me again? At that time, I doubted my ears.
Cut it out! Can't you see she's crying?
Satoshi-kun?
Of course, this is not Satoshi, but is in fact the Wizard of Words himself, our former main character. We miss him dearly. After a whole chapter and a half of absence, he's finally back. Keiichi Maebara, everyone!
Well, I mean, I'm sorry that your motorcycles were knocked down. How can I make you feel better? Of course, we don't have any money on us, you know?
The thugs suggest that Shion should pay with her body, and they talk about stripping her down.
You stupid fucks! There's nothing arousing about stark nakedness. Leave her socks on at least, no matter what. That's the ironclad rule.
God damn it, Keiichi.
Listen up, monkeys. What's the difference between Homo sapiens and other animals? That's right, humans wear clothes. Human beings without clothes are just animals.
This is gonna go on for a while, so do you mind if I fast forward real quick?
If you get aroused only when a girl's completely naked, you're less than human. You might as well be animals. I'm gonna knock some sense into you. Clench those teeth. You mentioned a porn movie, didn't you? Let's say there's a cosplay sex video. The definition of cosplay is too broad. To lecture on this subject, it's difficult to explain the spirit of the Yamato to the Yankees parachuting down from B-29s. So I'll limit the scope to the more popular one. School uniforms. What are the 3 most prominent divisions in the larger category of school uniforms?
Jesus, is he still talking? Oh my god, oh my! Eventually, Tomita and Okamura run into the alley and tell him that they found some people to help, and it's now clear to us that that whole speech was really just a stalling tactic because Keiichi is, in fact, a genius, but still, that seemed to come from someplace personal. Keiichi? Are you okay? The thugs run away, and Shion and Keiichi are alone.
Anyway, you alright, Mion? I was anxious to see how you'd fight back, but I guess 3 guys were too many, huh? I don't believe it.
Then, Keiichi reaches over and pats her on the head, just like Satoshi. However,
it didn't feel good. It hurt, actually.
She doesn't seem to like it very much. Now, before we move on, let's talk about this scene really quick. Because if you might remember, back in the 2nd chapter, this is not how it went down. Back then, it was Keiichi who kicked over the motorcycles and presumably Mion who saved him, which can only mean one thing. This isn't actually on the same timeline as Chapter 2. As you'll see, it's exceedingly similar, but there are some key differences. In fact, all of the answer arcs are in different timelines than their question counterparts, yet they still work to answer the questions raised in those timelines. It's complicated, but you'll quickly see what I mean next chapter. Later on, Shion talks to Mion to ask about Keiichi, and it's clear that Mion is really into him.
He wasn't worth stealing from Sis. Or was he? My heart throbbed. I was excited. It felt like I'd gotten a new toy.
She makes it clear, however, that her intention is more to push them together since Mion isn't really good with her own feelings. Unfortunately, this new intrusion in her life reminds Shion of Satoshi. The case is solved, so he should be able to come back now, right? She thinks about all of the reasons why he might not be back. He might not know he can wherever he is, etc. Mion's still talking though, and Shion has to tune into the conversation halfway through. It seems that Mion isn't so happy anymore though, and she's currently talking about an incident that we should be more than a little familiar with.
After all that, Uncle gave everybody a doll as a thank you gift. Everybody except for me. The cutest doll was in Kei-chan's bag. And you wanted that doll?
It didn't matter which one, but although Kei-chan knew only I didn't get one, he didn't give it to me. He didn't give it to me. He said the doll wouldn't fit me and that I should be born as a boy in my next life. Yikes. When you see it from someone else's perspective, Keiichi can be kind of an ass. I mean, I've been pointing this out since the beginning, but now you can actually see that I wasn't really joking. Shion comforts her and gives her some advice on how to get Keiichi to see her as a woman instead of a man.
You should always be smiling, but cry when it really counts. That's how you typically do it. Maybe I should try that on Kei-chan myself.
Huh? No, don't!
He's the boy you like, so I guess it's natural that I like him too. How can I attract him? Hey sis, why don't we have a competition over him?
No, never! I'll kick you into orbit if you come near Hinamizawa!
I'm happy for you, sis. It's not too late at all. The boy I love is missing. You know? Compared to that, you're very lucky.
Clearly, Shion doesn't really like Keiichi all that much. She just likes to tease Mion. On top of that, she realizes that slowly, Keiichi is replacing Satoshi in everyone's minds. Satoshi really is vanishing for good now, and that scares her.
Had I been thinking about Satoshi-kun all the time for the past year, I wasn't proud of my own answer. I'd become used to life without Satoshi-kun. I was getting used to life with Keiichi Maebara.
She thinks that if she just tried harder, maybe he would have come home. Of course, she did try. She conferred with Oishi, she used Takano's scrapbooks to do research into Watanagashi, but nothing came of any of it. People in Hinamizawa aren't supposed to talk about the curse, so even Satoshi's disappearance is being erased. Shion is desperate that people don't forget him.
I miss you, Satoshi-kun. I want to go shopping with you again. I want to tease you, and I want you to stroke my head again. Your hand was so warm. Satoshi-kun.
We cut to another day, another time, sometime in the near future. Shion is at the shrine with the club, teasing Mion over Keiichi.
See you, Kei-chan. Sis might assault me if I stick around any longer, so I'll get going.
He pats her on the head again, and once again, Shion doesn't really like it.
The warmth remained on the top of my head. It felt ticklish and sore.
She stops her moped and leans against a telephone pole.
I'm sorry, Satoshi-kun. I'm sorry. I never forgot about you. I still remember you. I can never smile because you aren't here. I can't.
She recalls Keiichi's insensitive touch in comparison and realizes that she kind of hates him.
Oh, Satoshi-kun.
And suddenly, quite without warning, Shion hears Satoshi talking and starts talking back.
I'm sorry, Shion.
Why are you apologizing, Satoshi-kun? I'm the one who should apologize. Even though I said I'd wait for you. Even though I believed my heart wouldn't change. My heart is full of holes. You're leaking out from the small cracks in my heart, little by little.
Okay, can I just say that holy fuck, that's a raw line. Satoshi asks if he's hurting Shion by being here, and Shion denies it, saying that she wants him to be with her always. She begs him to tell her where he is.
There isn't an address.
I knew it. Telling me you've always been with me. Always been by my side. It's such a cliche.
Yeah, so now Shion's thinking that Satoshi is most likely dead after all. Maybe she's talking to his ghost or something. Or Shion's finally just lost it, man. I don't know what's happening anymore. Anyway, his ghost or whatever promises to be with Shion always, and a car passing finally snaps Shion out of it. She realizes that she's got to get back to her apartment, but stops cold in her tracks after walking toward her moped, because just then, she hears an extra footstep behind her. Satoshi really is there. At least that's what Shion thinks.
It took me a while to notice that my cheeks were wet with tears.
We now cut to Shion living her best life with her ghost boyfriend.
I told him all the small details from my daily life. The places I wanted to go with him, the things I wanted to do with him, and I told him a lot of things.
She's sitting alone in her apartment, talking to Satoshi, which she does all night, scared that she'll wake up and he'll be gone, until finally she falls asleep. But the next morning, she still feels him there.
And so I began my strange life with Satoshi-kun. He couldn't laugh, mumble, or stroke my head, but he was always with me, always by my side.
Okay, this is weird, right? I'm not the only one who thinks this is really weird. Shion claims that she can't feel him as strongly in crowded environments, so she ends up hiding out in the apartment a lot.
But Satoshi-kun got upset about that. He'd keep mumbling unhappily. Now that I knew he'd always be with me, I shouldn't just stay home all the time.
Still, she worries that someday, without warning, he might just disappear. Of course, she doesn't tell anyone about him because they'd never understand. Yeah, because you're crazy. Kasai seems to be a little worried about her as he pushes her to go to Watanagashi, which she agrees to.
I wanted to go to the festival with Satoshi-kun. I knew he liked to see me having fun with everybody. He might get jealous if I play with Kei-chan.
Crazy! Of course, the Watanagashi goes exactly as you expect. Shion butts in on the club's activities by poking fun at Mion and ends up hanging out with them, lamenting that she can't pull Satoshi in to join them, but he can only watch from the sidelines. Suddenly, however, she bumps into someone she recognizes. It's Takano. And Tomatake, of course. Takano mentions that she hasn't seen Shion around the library recently, but before they can say much more, the drums that signify the beginning of the ceremony start to pound. When Takano and Tomatake don't move, however, Shion questions them.
To tell you the truth, We're thinking of sneaking into the ritual storehouse.
And this is where the timelines of Chapter 2 and Chapter 5 become virtually identical. Shion is not too fond of the ritual storehouse, having been told to stay away from it all of her life, but Takano's offer to see inside it is tempting. Currently, she's torn between her two hypotheses, whether Satoshi is alive or dead.
Maybe I'll get to deny the hypothesis that Satoshi-kun was sacrificed by seeing the inside of the ritual storehouse for myself.
On her way over, she sees Keiichi struggling to see Rika over the crowd of people.
If I took him along, we could split the guilt. I wanted a partner in crime.
Wow. Oh yeah, just in case Oyashiro-sama decides to smite me, I want to make sure that I don't get God alone. Jesus, what a bitch.
Since the boy I love disappeared last year because of the curse, maybe Mion's love should disappear this year.
Jesus, what a bitch! She quickly shakes that thought away, realizing how terrible it is, even though she's still acting on it anyway. But the two of them make it just in time to see Tomitake picking the lock.
Why does a photographer have lock-picking skills?
And just like last time, the two kids plus Takano head inside. They enter the room full of torture implements, but Shion is more interested in the statue of Oyashiro-sama at the back.
If Satoshi-kun's disappearance really was a curse, I couldn't forgive this god.
As Takano explains the history of the village to Keiichi, Shion wanders back by the altar and sees that there are fresh flowers in a vase. This shrine is still being maintained.
So the brutality that dwelled in this ritual storehouse is still alive and well in Hinamizawa.
However, she realizes that by this action, this maintenance, that humans really can be the only ones responsible for the curse. Oyashiro-sama doesn't really exist, but the humans who believe in him, who want to carry out his will, they certainly do. Which means that ultimately, Satoshi's disappearance does have a culprit. Someone she can track down. Someone, no doubt, very close by. As she's musing on this, Shion hears a sound. A thumping. At first she thinks that Takano has dropped one of her scrapbooks, but then she hears it again, from directly behind her. Is it Satoshi?
What's wrong, Satoshi-kun? Are you angry about something? Hey, you're Satoshi-kun, aren't you?
She realizes that these actions aren't very like Satoshi at all, and comes to the conclusion that there is a second invisible presence that's thumping on the floorboards. This scares her so much, not knowing what this new entity is, that she runs back to Keiichi and Takano. He asks if she's alright, to which she says she is.
You know, like a liar.
Then I'd appreciate if you didn't stretch my clothes too much.
It's clear, by the way, both he and Takano don't hear the sound at all. Takano continues speaking, telling her horror stories.
If it's the curse, then I wonder what kind of death it'll be this year. If it's the sacrifice, then will I be thrown into the Onigafuchi swamp while still alive? And it is tonight, you know, the night of Oyashiro-sama's curse.
Behind all this, the thumping still continues without cease. Finally, Tomitake opens the door to tell them that the ceremony is over and they'd better leave before someone sees them. They all oblige, Takano somewhat reluctantly, but Shion hangs back a bit.
I didn't hear that sound anymore. I didn't feel that presence. I didn't feel Satoshi-kun either. But somehow, I wasn't too sad about that. Even if he followed me out here, I wouldn't be able to tell if it was really him or somebody else.
After all that happened, Shion attends the traditional Sonozaki family post-Watanagashi get-together, but in an attempt to forget about the creepy ritual storehouse, she has a little too much to drink. She can't even get into a car, as she might barf. So Mion lets her stay the night, and the two of them get into bed in Mion's room. But Shion suddenly wakes up in the middle of the night, only to find that Mion is gone. Shion goes to look for her, and sees a light on in the hag's bedroom, way too late for her strict bedtime.
But you know, those young ones went too far.
You're right. They made Oyashiro-sama angry, so I guess they got what they deserved. It's probably Takano-san.
It's probably Takano-san. And what day was it today?
Shion begins to panic. Clearly something has happened to Takano, and after they said they got what they deserved,
they knew we snuck into the ritual storehouse. Then would that mean Keiichi and I are also subject to Oyashiro-sama's curse?
A phone rings in the hallway, and at that very moment, Shion feels someone behind her. But when she turns, there's no one there, and she doesn't think it's Satoshi. At that moment, a memory comes to mind.
Have you ever experienced anything like that? Those footsteps always followed me. They even came to my bedside and looked down at me.
Something has been following her since she exited the ritual storehouse. Something that isn't Satoshi.
You feel someone is watching from a distance. Then it watches from right behind you. After that, you start hearing an extra footstep.
It's almost as though Rena Ryugu was predicting what would happen to me. And it's then she realizes that all that time ago, Rena hadn't been talking about Satoshi. She'd been talking about Shion.
The curse of Oyashiro-sama. What is the curse of Oyashiro-sama?
But before she can ponder this further, someone grabs her by the collar. It's Mion. Without saying a word, she drags Shion silently to the phone with her, answers it, and tells someone to take care of things on their end before promptly hanging up. Then she turns to Shion.
Did you hear?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Just what you heard. The curse of Oyashiro-sama fell upon Tomatake-san and Takano-san.
It's really very unfortunate. Tomatake-san killed himself by clawing out his throat. Takano-san was burned to death in an oil drum. When Shion asks why they had to die like that, Mion only responds that it was because they made Oyashiro-sama angry. And it is in this moment that Shion realizes that she can never be saved from the curse. The curse doesn't have to be related to the dam project. It can be for anything. Literally anything at all. She wonders how Takano and Tomatake could have possibly received such gruesome punishment for the relatively minor crime. But then it dawns on her.
The main Sonozaki family was capable of it. The Sonozaki family had been pulling the strings behind the series of mysterious deaths. They could do it. The Sonozaki family made Satoshi-kun disappear completely. They could do it.
Without warning, Mion collapses. Or, I guess without warning for us. Shion knew this was going to happen as she just used her stun gun on Mion, which she had on her because she never got undressed for bed.
I didn't know who killed them exactly, whose idea it was, or who ordered it, but Mion and the hag knew everything. Satoshi-kun. Now I finally know. Now I know what I need to do.
Shion immediately springs into action. She enters the hag's room and stuns her as well. Then she grabs a cart from an outdoor storehouse and piles both of their bodies on it before dragging them out to the woods. Where is she taking them? The Sonozaki family torture dungeon, of course. She puts Mion in a cell and then straps Oreo to a wheelchair specifically modified to confine someone. Then she waits for them to wake up. Her plan is to question the hag and get her to tell her everything. But Mion wakes up first, so she talks to her instead.
Shion, what do you think you're doing? Good morning, Mion. You never thought you'd be in there, huh?
As the acting head, I order you, open this up.
You don't sound so scary in there. You need to talk more like a leader, don't you think? Though, talking that way will only make you look like a fool.
She's laughing purely to imitate Mion, but the sound echoes oddly against the stone walls, which Shion doesn't like, so she stops. She then questions Mion about the most recent murders, about Tomatake and Takano, but Mion refuses to answer.
Hey, Mion, as the successor, why don't you tell me? Let's see. First, about the series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa. What's the meaning of it?
Mion answers, responding in the affirmative that it's probably to signal the end of the dam conflict, but she seems pretty unsure, claiming that as the successor, she's really only a glorified messenger for Oreo, and that the hag kept a lot of things from her.
I really don't understand it myself, but it's like I take care of problems on the surface, and someone else takes care of problems on the underside.
But she has no idea who this person might be. So Shion changes the subject. She asks if the reason Tomatake and Takano were chosen as victims was because they'd snuck into the storehouse. Oddly, Mion seems surprised to hear about it, but didn't she just say before that they'd gotten what they deserved? Regardless, she certainly acts like that act deserves a bigger punishment than Shion thinks.
What you know and what I know aren't matching up anymore. Of course, I shouldn't just waltz into the storehouse, but to be killed in such a gruesome way for doing it? I never knew that. Did you?
Mion explains that though the children of the village don't, the elders take the rules of the village very seriously. Then Shion, still without telling her that she herself also went into the storehouse, asks her about the victims. Usually someone dies and someone goes missing, so why are there 2 bodies this year? And yet, even if she doesn't know it was her, Mion does know one thing. Actually, 4 people snuck into the shrine storage. So maybe the other 2 will become sacrifices and get demoned away. Shion realizes then that she and Keiichi are in danger. And almost immediately, she comes up with a plan. If Shion disappears, everyone will think she was demoned away. Shion will pretend to be Mion and keep an eye on Keiichi. She will be a decoy for herself. She will find this mysterious X-person who is carrying out Oyashiro-sama's curse for the Sonozakis and take her revenge for Satoshi. Initially, she thinks that X might be Irie, as he is the Heg's doctor, which would mean that he always has an excuse to speak with her, and a lot of the mysteries about the cases would make sense if a doctor was the culprit. But she quickly discards the idea, because the Heg most likely wouldn't trust him, considering that he's an outsider to the village. Her second thought is the other heads of the 3 families. There's no way it's Rika, which leaves her with Kimiyoshi, a likely possibility. And now, most likely, he, or whoever X really is coming after Shion.
I was scared that X was after me. But when I thought about it, I realized, whoever it was, this person had gotten Satoshi-kun. I'd looked so hard, but I couldn't find him. But now, he was trying to find me. I wasn't only being chased, I was chasing too. I was no longer afraid of dying to the 5th year's curse. It had become a game.
Hey, you know when I said earlier that I thought Shion had lost it? Yeah, that was wrong. Now she's lost it. And now that she's steeled herself, it's time to question the Hag. Unfortunately, she's very much dead. The force from Shion's stun gun killed her. Shion starts to freak out again, but realizes that since she was the ultimate enemy, she would have killed her sooner or later anyway. She's now just frustrated that she didn't have a chance to question her first.
My revenge for Satoshi-kun started with the unexpected death of my grandmother. She didn't deserve an easy death from a stun gun.
She grabs a whip from the wall, a cat of 9 tails specifically, and repeatedly whips the Hag's corpse. But just then, she notices something.
The person who had been watching me since I snuck into the shrine storage. I sensed this person sitting in the tatami room. It enjoyed watching me torture my grandmother.
But just what the hell is it, anyway?
I see. Rena told me. Are you Oyashiro-sama? You can't fool me. Are you saying that you're Oyashiro-sama and that the curse of Oyashiro-sama really does exist? Come on! Who would believe something like that? Huh? Well, I don't care if you saw what I did. I won't charge you for it. But if you're thinking of interfering, I won't hold back, you know.
But regardless of what she does, it doesn't respond to her. She shakes herself and makes to discard the Hag's corpse. She remembers another horror story Kasai told her about a hidden well deep within the Sonozaki dungeons, and she goes to ask Mion if it's really true. Mion isn't feeling very cooperative at the moment, however.
Did you hear some noise earlier? That was me whipping the old lady. Don't worry, I won't whip you. But if you don't cooperate, I might punish her some more. Next time I won't use a whip.
Mion points out the cell that it's hiding in, and of course, there it is. The pit into hell itself, utterly disguised by the surrounding rocks. She wheels Oreo into the dungeons and over to the hole, and when Mion acts horrified, she tells the truth.
She's dead. Rest assured, I didn't torture her to death. It was probably the stun gun. I could just leave her body here, but I don't want it to rot, you know?
How could you?
Hey, do you want to take care of her even now that she's dead? Maybe you could use chopsticks to pick maggots off her body. Ha!
Shion, why did you do this?
Let's see. Why do you think?
Satoshi? Shion thinks about this for a moment. The Hag's death wasn't necessarily revenge, but she did have a reason to kill her.
Do you know what it was? It wasn't just because she killed Satoshi-kun. It's because she lied! You said it too. You told me that if I ripped out my nails, she would forgive everyone. But she didn't keep her promise. She made Satoshi-kun disappear. Why? What was that for?
Of course, it was Mion who came to her and said that everything was forgiven.
Yeah, You lied! Liar, 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 liar! Damn it! Damn it! Give me back Satoshi-kun! I want him back! I want him! I want him! I want him! I want him!
Her anger is not directed as Mion. as she believes that she honestly didn't know Orio's plans.
Sorry to scare you. If you really don't know, I won't torment you. Don't worry. But if you were ever lying to me, well, you'll have to accept whatever comes your way. You know what I mean?
Fuck. You may have noticed my relative silence throughout most of this scene. That's mostly because I wanted you to see all of this before I comment it, because holy fuck, this revelation is nuts. Because at this point, something should be made very clear to you, something that was right under all our noses for the entire second chapter. Mion wasn't actually the culprit of that chapter. She never went crazy, and the entire time, it wasn't about Keiichi at all. Because the entire time, Mion was actually Shion, pretending to be Mion. The entire swapped identities bit that took up the whole first half of that chapter wasn't just fluff or character drama or filler, it served a very specific purpose, to show us that the two sisters could swap identities at any time and no one would ever be able to tell the difference. Just like the game scenes, the slice of life plotline had something very important to tell us, just something more concrete and less metaphorical. So, again, this should basically recontextualize the entire second chapter for you. I even pointed out some things that might not have made sense to you at the time in that video, or that you might not have even noticed that I pointed out at all. All the weird little moments of mischaracterization for Mion in that second half of the story wasn't just weird, they were on purpose. Higurashi is a story that demands 2 playthroughs, and by God, does it earn it. So, now where does that leave us? It's a little bit delayed this chapter, but now it's time for that slow descent into madness that we've all been waiting for. Except this time, we know exactly where it's going. And I'm frankly not very happy about it. Okay, so the last few sections of this chapter are each really long, but luckily a big portion of them is a recap from chapter 2 from Shion's perspective, so we can move through them a little faster. Just bear with me. Shion is having a wonderful dream. Satoshi has come home. He's back on the baseball team, still great in practice and also choking when it really counts. She starts crying, and the dream fades all the faster the more she tries to hold on to it.
A dream is a dream. I wished I hadn't woken up. But one must wake up from a dream. We live in a world where there are no dreams. And that's why we always wake up.
I get the distinct feeling that Ryokishi felt constrained by the relatively straightforward narration from Keiichi's perspective sometimes. Shion is of course alone in the Sonozaki main house now, and quickly has to cover for her ass as she receives 2 different phone calls in quick succession. The first is the mayor, Kimiyoshi, with a message for Oreo that there's going to be an emergency meeting tonight regarding the 5th year's curse. The second is Kasai.
Is Shion-san still there?
Shion decides to play both the part of Mion and Shion and goes to grab Shion so she can talk to Kasai. Kasai is just concerned about her health after last night and how she'll get back to Okinomiya, but she assuages his fears. Before she hangs up the phone, she asks him about the curse this year to see if he knows anything. After telling him the reason for the curse, she expects him to think that it's ridiculous, just like she does.
I see. That was stupid of them.
By the way, Kasai, actually, I did it too.
You went into the ritual storehouse, Shion-san? Don't you remember what happened last year? How do you think you can take care of this?
He begins to admonish her, but Shion hangs up the phone. She doesn't want to hear him reject her. She begins to muse again on how ridiculous it was that small act got Takano and Tomitaka killed, and her in this bizarre situation, but ultimately, there's no going back now.
The hag was already dead. Even if she wasn't, she was now at the bottom of the well. Therefore, it was already past the point where I could just cut my fingers off an apology.
Shion feels like she's balancing on the thinnest tightrope, and if she makes one wrong move, then she'll fall. But she has to keep moving forward.
I knew my life would end soon. In other words, I was actually already dead. A dead person has nothing to lose.
So it's time to figure out these mysteries and get her revenge. But first, she has to go to school as Mion. She meets up with Keiichi and Rena at the usual spot, and both comment on how unwell she looks. Shion tries to brush it off.
What's this? Kei-chan, are you worried about me? That's nice of you.
See? Can you see now? Remember back in chapter 2, both I and Keiichi commented on how weird this was coming from Mion, and now we know why. Because Mion would never say something like that. However, Shion actually would. God, this game's writing is so fucking good. They run to class, and the day goes by pretty normally, Shion keeping an eye on Keiichi the whole while. She realizes, however, that Keiichi hasn't noticed just how serious a crime he committed. She decides that she'd better meet him as Shion later to alert him so he'll be more aware of his surroundings. To that end as well, once she decides to head home early, she runs into him washing his face outside. She, of course, as Mion, indirectly confronts him about the Watanagashi festival.
Then, one more question. On that same night, did you see Shion?
Didn't you ask me that yesterday?
That's right. Mion, the real Mion, asked him immediately after he exited the storehouse.
I guess I just thought I'd get a different answer if I asked you again.
And thus, one of the most horrifying lines for Keiichi in the second chapter is revealed to entirely be Shion covering her own ass. Amazing! She warns him about the villagers saying bad things about him and the others, and leaves him with that.
This wasn't fun at all. But it could still be an interesting game.
Remember at the beginning of this chapter when Shion referred to her escape from St. Lucia's as a game? Well, now she's doing the same thing here, processing a harrowing situation as a game. I don't know whether that's a sign of psychopathy or just a horribly scared girl trying to play general, but either way, it wigs me the fuck out. After returning home and telling the maids to not bother coming around for the next few days, as Oryo is in a foul mood, Shion takes a nap and prepares to call and hopefully meet Keiichi as herself in a couple of hours. Of course, they agree to meet up at the library.
I never knew that playing two roles would be so much fun. To feel such enjoyment in this game of life or death. Maybe I was getting used to this situation.
Okay, you know what? I've decided. She's definitely a goddamn psychopath. Shion uses the hag's motorcycle to make it to Okinomiya without running into Keiichi and meets him at the station.
You're a little unsteady. You didn't get much sleep last night either, did you? You definitely went home from school early.
Ooh, too bad. I've been at home all day from the beginning. I'm smarter than my sis, after all. I hate this.
After Keiichi returned the books, I invited him into the inner section at the library.
She tells him all about the Sonozaki family to impress upon him just how dangerous they are, but before she can get into the actual main topic, she's interrupted.
Hello! Good afternoon. Are you on a date today? What I would give to be young again.
Of course, it's Oishi. Of course, he's investigating the killings from last night, and of course he knows that both Shion and Keiichi were also in the ritual storehouse. However, it appears that he actually wants Shion to skedaddle because she's hard to deal with and very well might lie to him. So right now, he just wants to talk to Keiichi. Like last time, Shion makes her excuses and leaves, promising to call Keiichi later that night. Then she takes off back towards Hinamizawa. She's got an emergency meeting to attend, after all. When she arrives, the others are a little surprised to see her instead of Oryo, but she makes her excuses and Kimiyoshi offers to lead the meeting in her stead. They enter the meeting house, and Kimiyoshi starts the meeting. He then explains the events of last night in more detail, again, most of which we already know. Finally, he asks Shion if Oryo had anything to say on the matter. Shion stands and tries to channel that inner successor that she's seen Mion exhibit.
Unfortunately, the curse of Oyashiro-sama has come to pass for the 5th time. This is deeply regrettable. Does anyone know why the curse happened again this year? I will tell you. It was because they broke the rule of the ritual storehouse and desecrated the sacred ground within.
The elders go nuts. They shout and scream and nearly lose their minds. It all scares Shion a little. She turns to Kimiyoshi, and even he, who is usually such a gentleman, is shouting right along with them.
The people in this room were true believers in Oyashiro-sama, just like the hag. They wouldn't hesitate to murder whoever made Oyashiro-sama angry on his behalf.
And if they didn't, they would do everything in their power to cover up that someone did. Shion regains order and then tells the entire room that there are 2 others who snuck into the storehouse. She even names them and claims that Keiichi will be punished and Shion is already missing. She turns to Kimiyoshi again to see his reaction. He was always her favorite uncle, but now he doesn't even have an expression on his face at all. After the meeting, Shion approaches Kimiyoshi and asks him to come to her house, as Oryo has something she wants to speak to him about in private. He arrives promptly at the Sonozaki main house, and Shion gets him some tea, claiming that Oryo will see him in a minute. In the meantime, she plies him for information.
You remember the incident from last year with Shion, yes? She became friendly with people from the Hojo family.
Kimiyoshi asks where she is now, and Shion tells him that she's in the basement. She's relieved to see that he seems concerned now that he's away from the meeting. Shion asks him what he thinks her punishment will be. He's unsure, but thinks it'll definitely be more than 3 fingernails. All this pretending to be Mion has made Shion reminisce about their time as children, about how Oryo always loved Mion, but hated Shion.
We didn't care who was Mion or Shion. So one day, we came up with an idea. We decided to share the joy Mion experienced and the sadness Shion experienced. We often switched places. Finally, they decided that we switched places because we were always together. On that day, Shion got to go to an amusement park. Since then, we've been separated.
Kimiyoshi interrupts her thoughts and asks if Shion regrets what she's done. Shion tells him that of course she does, and Kimiyoshi promises that he'll make sure she doesn't get demoned away. Shion is relieved that finally, someone is on her side.
Are you sure? Are you sure she won't be demoned away? Like Satoshi Hojo-kun was last year?
Of course she won't, Kimiyoshi replies. She's not a brat like that Hojo kid. I mean, of course he'd get demoned away. He's part of those gross, smelly, cursed Hojos. Except, Shion interrupts, shouldn't Satoshi have been forgiven, since Shion gave up 3 fingernails last year? 1 for Kasai, 1 for Yoshido, and 1 for Satoshi? But Kimiyoshi is confused, because Kasai, Yoshido, and Shion makes 3, right?
Huh? What? I endured excruciating pain. People held me down, so I couldn't move, but I endured. I had to endure 3 nails. Even Mion said afterwards. Everything was forgiven. Mion, didn't you say Satoshi-kun was forgiven? Didn't you?
Suddenly, Shion feels a strong breeze in the room, even though there should be none. She feels her true self standing behind her, the demon. He gives her permission, and she begins questioning Kimiyoshi. What exactly had Satoshi-kun done to deserve what he got? She knows it was Oryo's decision, that eventually the curse of Oyashiro-sama would fall on all the Hojos. Kimiyoshi, however, denies it.
Then why did you say, because he was one of the Hojos earlier? That's just it. Anything that happens to the Hojo family is the curse. As long as someone has the Hojo name, nobody cares about what happens to that person. That idea has spread like a virus amongst all the villagers. And you all believed in that idea. You couldn't even think straight anymore. People like you cornered Satoshi-kun and his family. Why did the curse fall upon him? What kind of crime has he committed?
Shion, once again, uses her stun gun. Later on, Shion calls Keiichi and fills him in on Tomitake and Takano's deaths. Like she thought, he's an entirely clueless moron. As she's talking to Keiichi in very vague terms, she explains to us what she's really thinking. In simple terms, she believes that the curse, in a way, really is like a virus. Oryo gives a vague inclination that so-and-so is an enemy of the village to some degree. That idea spreads among the villagers like a sort of infection, and someone, somewhere within the Sonozaki organization, mobilizes to kill that person on Watanagashi. But no one knows who it is, because no one actually gave an order. Everyone also covers for each other, creates false evidence, etc., and thus the curse stays a curse. It's an interesting theory to be sure, and Shion is definitely a smart cookie. However, there are some pretty glaring holes in it. Like, for instance, what if multiple people decide to carry out Oryo's wishes at the same time? Or what about the more likely scenario that everyone thinking that someone else is carrying out the crime and thusly no one does? How have they gotten this to work out so perfectly for 5 years in a row now? Even if she's probably not necessarily correct, keep these thoughts in mind. They might end up being important later. Regardless, Shion has already killed the hag who designed the system, and now she has Kimiyoshi, whom she thinks is the plague spreader, essentially. But of course, Shion has set a trap for whoever is involved in the conspiracy. There she waits, like some sort of a spider, waiting for someone to take the bait that is Keiichi Maebara. Speaking of which, Keiichi is currently screaming.
I didn't have anything to do with this! What will you do? How are you gonna take responsibility for this, huh? Hey, are you listening?
Shut up. I've heard enough of your pitiful tears. Shion hangs up the phone. Not upset or scared like we previously thought, but just sick of Keiichi's shit. Ha ha! Ha ha! She then calls the Kimiyoshi residence as Mion and has them mobilize the youth group to search for the mayor since he hasn't come home yet. So tragic. She finally goes down to the basement to check on Kimiyoshi before heading out. She's got him in the classic chain him to the ceiling position with a chain so short that he has to stand on his tiptoes to be able to breathe. She loosens him up a bit so he can talk. She doesn't learn a whole ton from him, just that the kidnapping of the minister's grandson we dealt with in Chapter 4 was in fact the Sonozaki's. At least he thinks it was, and that Satoshi is most likely dead. But where was his body dumped? Well, there's one pretty obvious location if you stop to think about it. One where no one would ever find him.
Then Satoshi-kun is at the bottom of that well?
She heads there immediately, screaming his name down into the pit. She considers heading down there, but thinks she'll ultimately just slip in the dark. And that's when she feels it. Satoshi's patented head pats.
Shion, you finally found me.
Satoshi-kun, I've been looking for you for so long. I'm sorry I couldn't find you while you were still alive. Sorry. I'm sorry.
It's not your fault, Shion.
I want to join you. I'm coming right now. I'm going to jump, so please catch me.
But you are alive, Shion. It's so important to be alive. You can't waste it.
Shion proclaims that without him, she doesn't want to live. But eventually, Satoshi talks her down, telling her that even alone, living is better than being dead.
I wasn't allowed to go down to the bottom. But the edge of this well was the place where you and I could meet.
After this, Shion confronts Mion one more time, telling her she found Satoshi, asking her if she was there when he was killed, which she denies.
I would have begged her to let him live. Liar. Huh?
You liar!
Shion remembers how cold Mion was on the day she got her fingernails ripped out, and she imagines just how cold she must have been the day Satoshi was killed. How betrayed he must have felt when she wasn't going to save him.
Why? Why didn't you help him? Even when he was going through a rough time because of his awful aunt, you didn't help him. I tried. Even when you didn't protect him from killing his aunt, I did. I sacrificed myself to fight for him. 3 nails were nothing.
Big words from someone who cried like a little bitch.
I couldn't help him. Do you know why? Because I was Shion then. But you were different. You were Mion. If I were you, I could have helped Satoshi-kun. Give it back, Mion. That name isn't just yours. It's mine, too. Besides, it was mine to begin with. Remember? I just let you be Mion. Remember? It was mine. Give it back to me. Give me my name back.
So, that's, a revelation. You might have been wondering why we kept getting so many references to the fact that Mion and Shion often switched places when they were younger, all throughout this chapter. Well, here's the payoff. And what a fucking payoff it is. Shion never gets more specific than this, so from what I can gather, here's the situation that went down when they were children. Mion and Shion were constantly switching places because no one could ever tell them apart. This frustrated everyone else to no end. Finally, on the day that Mion got her tattoo, the demon one, so that they could absolutely tell them apart, Shion got taken to an amusement park. The problem is that at the time, they were already switched. Mion was Shion, and Shion was Mion. So now, with the tattoo to tell them apart, Shion permanently became Mion, and vice versa. The Mion we know technically stole the successorship from the Shion we know. So, yeah. Fuck. Just for future reference, from here on out, our Shion starts to refer to herself as Mion, and it begins to get a little confusing. Absolutely on purpose, of course, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to be clear that I'm still going to refer to them as we know them. So the girl in the cage is Mion, and our narrator is Shion. Okay, got it? Good. Let's keep going then, because holy shit, somehow it now gets even worse. Shion goes to school as Mion again the next day, and after observing Keiichi to see how he's doing, her attention gets shifted to Rika. Up until this point, Shion hasn't paid much attention to her, as she's never seemed very connected to the state of affairs in Hinamizawa, but she is the head of one of the 3 families. She might actually know some things. Outside the school, the 2 girls talk. Shion asks her straight out what she thinks about Tomitake and Takano's deaths.
That's the curse of Oyashiro-sama.
But it's not over yet, is it? There should still be 2 more. Have you heard about what will happen to them?
She's playing dumb, but Rika has already said things that only someone in the know would know.
I think if they feel bad about what they've done, that should be fine.
Shion is appalled. She grabs Rika by the collar.
Huh? You're pretty stupid. Just like your predecessor, aren't you? The Furude family must understand better than anybody how sacred the ritual storehouse is. But those 4 people brought their filth in there.
What bad kitty cats? Meow.
Okay, I think she's just fucking with Shion now. Shion asks her what their punishment should be because they should be punished, after all, so that Oyashiro-sama's anger can be quelled.
Oyashiro-sama doesn't get angry even if someone enters the storehouse.
Shion is shocked at how sure Rika sounds, though she must be lying because everybody knows that it's forbidden to enter the storehouse for just that reason.
That's why your parents died of the curse 2 years ago. Oyashiro-sama was angry because they didn't deserve to serve him.
Oyashiro-sama would never do that. My father didn't die because of the curse of Oyashiro-sama.
Okay, well, that's new information we've never heard before. This is getting kind of weird now. I think Shion agrees with me because she's kind of freaking out about it. She realizes that Rika must be nearly a better actor and liar than she is. In a rage, she slaps the child a few times and pushes her down to the ground before proclaiming that both her and Kimiyoshi ought to be punished too for changing the lock on the storehouse, just to cover her own ass. Then she tells her that the Furude family, ought to do something about that Keiichi, since he got in their storehouse and everything, before taking off, leaving a tiny child crying. Of course, this would be right when Keiichi comes across her back in Chapter 2. Like we thought, what led up to that conversation was a confrontation with Mion. Meanwhile, Shion is furious at Rika. She seems to be furious at a lot of people lately.
I was going to make sure she suffered, and then kill her. I've heard of a torture technique where you pound dozens of nails into a victim's fingers. I already found a restraining table and the tools for it.
Great. Fantastic. Super. We love to see a girl boss winning. Later on, Shion wonders how good old Uncle Kimiyoshi is doing. She just left him to his fate, essentially, tied up from the ceiling on his tiptoes. He'll die sooner or later when his muscles finally give out. She's sad about the whole thing, though, because she was really happy when he said that he would save Shion. Man, if only he hadn't badmouthed Satoshi, she would have totally let him live. But because they let their hatred of the Hojos infect the rest of the village, all the leaders of Hinamizawa deserve to suffer.
Therefore, everyone in the village deserves to be a victim of the curse of Oyashiro-sama. Kimiyoshi and the others created an environment that excused murder in that name.
She realizes then that if Tomitake and Takano hadn't committed a more grave sin, that year the victims probably would have been Satoko and her uncle, the last remaining Hojos, because it doesn't matter which of the family died. Shion then has a fantasy where Satoko was the one who got demoned away instead of Satoshi. He would finally be free from all his troubles, though he would be sad for a while.
But time would heal him. I'd even help. He didn't have to live in his house in Hinamizawa. There were plenty of empty rooms in the apartment block where I lived. He didn't need to go to school in Hinamizawa. He could go to school with me in Okinomiya instead. So I'd be with Satoshi-kun all the time.
Okay, yikes. As someone who's actually been in a position to have fantasies like that before, including, frankly, the delusional part, this is absolutely some possessive-ass yandere behavior, and I know that some of you out there are so into it, and you should maybe reconsider your hentai addiction. After school, Shion goes home and spends a good deal of time responding to phone calls from various parties in the village about the recent developments with the mayor. She also hears from Oishi, who knows way more about all of this than he should, and Shion is impressed. It seems that most people are now aware of the target Keiichi has in his back, and she thinks that it's kind of a shame, because even if he'll never replace Satoshi, she doesn't dislike him by any means, even calling him funny. Perhaps if he inadvertently helps her destroy all of her enemies, she'll let him live. That's what makes her different from the hag, after all. Just then, as she's getting started on dinner, the doorbell rings. On the other side is, who else? Rika Furude, asking for a bottle of soy sauce. Shion finds the notice about the Sonozaki's extra soy sauce in the fridge and quickly puts 2 and 2 together. In order to maintain normalcy, she lets her in to grab the soy sauce. Rika acts like nothing happened between them earlier in the day, but Shion notices that as she's walking down the hall, Rika is matching her footsteps almost perfectly. They make it to the kitchen, and Shion reaches down under the floor to help her with a big barrel of soy sauce, but as she turns back to her,
Huh? Who was this? I saw Rika, but it wasn't Rika at all.
She briefly wonders if Rika has a twin, as her sudden transformation is almost like when she and Mion switch places, but before she has any time to ask her anything, Rika sprays her in the face with pepper spray. Then she grabs her by the hair and throws her to the floor, sitting directly on top of her stomach. What? What? Holy shit, I mean, we knew that Rika was probably possessed by something? We saw that back in Chapter 4, but what the actual fuck is going on? Shion struggles against her for a solid minute, but the pepper spray is absolutely impeding her. But when she's finally able to look at her face, she sees the bottle in one hand. What I didn't expect was in her other hand. How could I mistake it for anything else? It was definitely a syringe. Hey, I don't suppose you remember, all the way back in Chapter 2, when Keiji basically confessed to Rika that he was being hunted by the Sonozakis, and she said that she would definitely do something? Well, now she's certainly doing something! Even as Shion's struggling against the pepper spray, she manages to find out where Rika's face is and slap at her a few times to get her off. Then she recovers her stun gun. Hey! Are you picking a fight with me? You want me to wreck you? Also, sorry, really small detail, but I actually love it that whenever Shion's about to get into a fight, she starts using a lot rougher language. From my limited knowledge of Japanese, the original characters she uses for that hey are actually O and U, which makes kind of an oi sound? Kind of? Regardless, it's a really common phrase that a lot of tough guy types use in Japanese media, at least, and it just tickles my little writer brain to realize that without having to say anything, you can absolutely tell that Shion is the daughter of a Yakuza. Anyway, Shion realizes, based on the fact that Rika's ultimate goal was to stick her with the syringe, it must start working pretty immediately, whatever it does, otherwise her sneak attack wouldn't make much sense. In order to regain the upper hand, Shion flings some loose newspapers at Rika and uses the opportunity to jab her with her stun gun. She climbs on top of her and wrestles the syringe from her, immediately injecting the little child with it instead.
Look at you! Did you really think you could defeat me? Think again!
But then Rika gets up. Shion is shocked before seeing that her stun gun had accidentally gotten switched to the lowest setting in the middle of their tussle. Meanwhile, Rika is not looking so good. Clearly that syringe is having some kind of effect.
Hanyu.
This is funny! So funny! By the way, this is the iconic scene from the anime that everyone uses when they talk about this show.
But please don't throw up here. Go to the bathroom, okay? I'm going to enjoy how long it will take for you to die.
She laments that she won't be able to torture Rika if she dies from the syringe, so suggests that they move this party to the Sonozaki torture dungeon. But before she can hit her with a stun gun, Rika grabs a kitchen knife.
Are you seriously thinking about fighting me with a knife in that condition? You can't even stand straight.
You're right. Like you said, I'm at my limit. But if that means getting captured and tortured to death by you, then sorry, I'm taking my leave.
We lost our minds wasn't a fitting phrase for the people of Hinamizawa. It was a feeling of release, when modern demons could stop pretending to be human. Yes, this was a mad banquet of demons, with a savoring of blood and devouring of flesh.
But still, as Shion goes on the defensive, waiting for Rika's attack, she wonders what she means by taking her leave. This is made very apparent in the next second, however, when instead of trying to attack Shion with the knife, Rika stabs herself in the throat. Repeatedly.
I won't give you the satisfaction of killing me.
What I saw before me was a beautiful sight. Every time Rika struck her throat, tiny drops of blood splattered the boring white world around her. It was like a dance. A dedication dance by the final head of the Furude family. The demon's last dance of dedication to Oyashiro-sama.
So now's the time when Shion really loses her goddamn marbles. Look at those shits. They're just all over the goddamn floor. It's gonna take so fucking long to pick those up. She howls like some sort of animal, or, one could maybe say, a demon.
This was death. The most final of judgments. And it was right here before me. The demons howled, screamed, and roared.
Rika stares back at Shion with the dead eyes of a corpse. Then she smiles briefly and sticks her hands out like she's reaching for something before turning them on herself and tearing her own throat out. Just like Tomatake. And then, well, then she falls to the floor and dies. After screaming once more out loud, Shion is elated to discover that she has kind of done it. She's apprehended and killed all of the heads of the three families, presumably the culprits of the entire curse system of Hinamizawa. She seems to have finally avenged Satoshi-kun. But, as always, revenge don't do shit, and Shion quickly returns to lamenting that she couldn't do anything to save him. At the time, she was Shion, after all. That's when she remembers the day that changed everything.
Shion, She said she wanted to eat red snapper sashimi that day. I was supposed to eat that. But Shion pouted and cried. That's why I let her switch, just for that night. When morning came, we weren't twins anymore. The one with the demon was Mion, and the one without the demon was Shion.
She remembers pleading to her mother to recognize that she is Mion, but of course, even her own mother can't tell the two of them apart.
You knew, didn't you, that the relatives weren't gathering for a simple party that night? You knew!
No, I didn't. I really didn't know.
Huh? How can you say that? You were so persistent that day. You never gave up asking me. And that night, you knew what was going on, and you took Mion from me. You took Mion from me! Give Mion back! I'm the one who's Mion. I am Mion Sonozaki! Don't call yourself Mion, you imposter!
Shion sticks her hair up in a ponytail, just like Mion always does. And now there are two identical Mions, something that is never supposed to happen. Shion demands that Mion let her hair down and tells her to never pretend to be Mion again. Mion agrees, and the demon within Shion finally wakes up for good.
Shion, you committed a great sin. You were Mion until now. I won't forgive you. I'll never forgive you. I could have saved Satoshi-kun. You took him from me, and you killed him. I will kill you. I'll kill you in the best possible way. Starting today, I'm going to think of the best, most gruesome way to kill you. Shion, you better spend every minute fearing what's coming to you. And after you're dead, I'll throw you into the well. You better apologize to Satoshi-kun when you get there.
After abusing Mion a little more, Shion goes upstairs and decides that she'd better at least clean up the kitchen a little. But before she can get started, she gets an unexpected phone call. Hey, Satoko, I made too much dinner tonight, so I told Rika-chan to eat here with me. Why don't you come over too? I have plenty of food left. Rika-chan has already started eating. And, well, we all know how that encounter goes, so we don't really have to see it right now, do we? Don't worry. We'll come back to Satoko later. It is the big conflict that this chapter has been building to all along, after all. Later on, Shion calls Keiichi as herself again and puts on a very good job at crying about the mayor, even while he's literally dying in her basement. Though she does admit that there is a genuine bit of sadness in her words. She even impresses herself, however, when she makes up the idea on the spot that the Sonozaki family is going to come for everyone around them before killing them.
Rika-chan. The truth is, I told her about it. I told Rika-chan today.
Of course, now Keiichi confesses about telling Rika, and all along we realize now that the demoning away of Kimiyoshi and Rika wasn't in response to anything we could comprehend back when we were still in Keiichi's brain, and all along, it was just a marvelous coincidence that things happened to line up to make it look like conspiracy. Sometimes the truth is far stranger than you could ever imagine. Keiichi eventually hangs up to go check on Rika, and Shion waits patiently for the phone to ring again, knowing that Keiichi will ultimately call Mion for help. Just like in Chapter 2, Shion meets up with Keiichi and Rena to go check on Rika and Satoko. Shion muses on the fact that she's still wigged the fuck out by Rena, whom she thinks is much more experienced with this whole being a demon thing than she is. Somehow. Also, like last time, Rena goes to check the main house, and Shion holds the ladder for Keiichi to check the windows of the shed. While he does so, they talk about Satoko and Rika. Satoko's also an orphan. Her parents fell from a cliff because of Oyashiro-sama's curse. Then her older brother, Satoshi-kun. He disappeared.
Satoshi? I've heard that name before.
He'd heard the name before? Don't you know whose desk you're using every day? You act as if it belongs to you. You drop food on it while eating lunch. You drool on it while taking a nap. Don't you know who it really belongs to?
And this, of course, leads directly into the Mion acts really weird scene from Chapter 2, which we dubbed fully, so go check that one out too. This time we get to see Shion's inner monologue for when she's telling Keiichi that Satoko is cursed, and it's mostly just stuff we already know that she's been thinking at this point. But now Shion finally comes to the conclusion that it's not the three families, not the curse system. The real culprit behind Satoshi's murder was, of course, Satoko. She's the one who started him down the path that he took, so it's all her fault. It always has been. Yup, this is absolutely healthy. You already killed the people that you thought were responsible, but it didn't make you feel any better, so now you're just gonna kill every single person that looks at you funny and claim that they're responsible for your obsessive crush's murder. I can't forgive her. I can't forgive that girl. There can be no peace with her. There can be no peace. Just then, her maddest mantra gets interrupted by the arrival of help, and again, just like last time, everybody goes to look for the girls. Keiichi wanders away into the forest, about to have his own existential breakdown, but all Shion thinks is that he's a fucking idiot for making it so easy on anyone who would want to kill him. Eventually, of course, Oishi shows up, and Shion recognizes that with both of the other family heads missing, Shion is number 1 on his shit list. Ultimately, she decides that she'll have to destroy her own position as well, and she figures that she'll let Oishi be the one to see her final moment. You're right, Oishi. I did it. Mion Sonozaki, the head of the Sonozaki family, is the culprit. Finally, after a long night, Shion returns to the basement to unwind a little. Kimiyoshi is finally, as the kids say, super dead. And needless to say, Satoko is not happy about it. She's not happy about a lot of things, actually. And on top of that, she knows who Shion really is.
How dare you? How dare you kill Rika?
Rika Furude deserved it. She came over to kill me. I just fought back. That's all. If you don't believe me, that's fine. It's none of your business anyway.
What are you going to do with me?
I'm going to kill you.
From the cells, Mion screams and begs her to not kill Satoko, and Shion once again berates her for not doing anything to save Satoshi. Then she stabs Satoko's right arm. Mion continues to beg.
Why couldn't you say that for Satoshi-kun? I was the one screaming like you back then. But no matter how loudly I screamed, it never reached them, spared him, or saved him. I want you to go through the same thing I did.
But Mion keeps speaking. Shion tells her that if she can apologize 1,000 times, she'll let Satoko go, and bless her heart, the poor girl tries. I'm sure some of you thought that Shion was acting really out of character at the end of Chapter 2 when Mion was torturing Keiichi, begging her not to kill him, acting really upset, etc., and now we can see why. For Shion, it would be pretty out of character, but for Mion, who is earnest, trusting, and cares for her friends above all else, it makes total sense. Shion continues to torture Satoko and gets some marvelous crying in response.
All you ever do is cry to get what you want. You think your Nini is going to appear out of nowhere, knock me aside, and rescue you, huh?
She slides the knife all the way from Satoko's wrist to her elbow. By the way, this is another scene that there's no way I can do full justice to in this format, so click that handy little link at the top right to see our full rendition of it instead. Holy moly, Bo nailed it.
You just leeched off of him. And has he got injured? For your sake, you lived by sucking his blood. You are cursed. How can you still call for him? Huh? Cry as much as you want, and realize that Satoshi-kun will never come for you. You cornered him. You made him disappear. You killed him. What's this? You don't feel anything in your right arm anymore? Okay, then let's use your left.
But that's when something happens. No matter what she does, Satoko isn't screaming anymore. She just simply moans. When Shion asks her if she's trying to be tough, Satoko finally gives her a response to her claims.
Yes, I think that's the truth. I cornered Nini. That is why he disappeared. I've known that ever since the day he vanished. I have no excuse. He will come back someday, and when he does, I'm going to show him how independent I have become. I'm going to show him that I can really live on my own.
When he comes back, huh? Damn you. What do you think you're saying?
If it is fun for you, go ahead. Stab me as much as you please. But if you think I'm going to cry for Nini, well, too bad. I will not cry. Ever. Nini is watching me. He is watching me endure this. He will see that I'm not like I was before. And when he sees that, he is going to come back. Come on, try it. I will not cry. Try to see how strong Satoko Hojo is.
In a rush of anger, furious that Satoko now of all times has developed maturity, Shion stabs her in a mad frenzy. But regardless of what she does to her, Satoko refuses to cry.
I couldn't defeat Satoko. I couldn't crush her strength. Satoko had achieved her goal. She still believes Satoshi will come back one day. But Satoshi-kun hasn't seen any of that. Instead, I, who never even thought that Satoshi-kun would come back, was the one who witnessed her strength. All along, Shion wasn't the one who believed in Satoshi, wasn't the one who truly loved him. It was Satoko all along. And it is at this moment that Shion realizes her error. Far too late to change anything. Shion's tale is ultimately one of tragedy, and for once, we as the audience are not expected to be in her headspace. We as the viewers know exactly what's coming, what's about to happen, and all we can do is watch helplessly as Shion continues down this path that we know is wrong. We know that the best way to honor Satoshi is to wait for him, just as Satoko has, or failing that, properly grieve him. Instead, Shion is headed down the path of a demon. She has buried her emotions and her feelings deep down inside, and is focused instead on avenging him. If you think about Satoshi, actually consider him for more than 2 seconds, you know that this is the last thing that he would have wanted. Shion has become a demon, throwing away her soul, the very soul that loves Satoshi. She has essentially exiled him from her heart in the name of revenge. We've known this. We've known this is exactly what would happen all along. This chapter, like Chapter 2, plays with the idea of demonic possession, yet it does so in an entirely different way than we could ever imagine. Because while Shion claims near possession by a demon, the real victim of this other, acting against our wants and wills, is of course us as the audience. We know that this is not right. Her actions will never bring her happiness, and all this road that she's taken leads to is despair and ultimately her death. Yet we are forced to watch her make these decisions, continue down this path anyway. We are possessed by Shion, and my god, doesn't it just make you want to scream. Satoko is now very dead, and Shion imagines Satoshi coming to greet her in the afterlife, claiming that they can now be together forever. Satoshi-kun, I was waiting for you too. What meaningless words. He was already dead inside of me.
And of course, it is just at that moment that this imaginary Satoshi turns to Shion and admonishes her. He only asked one thing of her after all, before he died.
I'll leave Satoko to you.
Shion killed Satoko, the one person she promised him she'd protect. She has failed, Satoshi. She never waited for him. She never believed he would return. She might as well have killed him herself.
Satoko wasn't here anymore. She had no more need for her bloody, painful shell. But I'm still here, trapped in my bloody, tainted flesh. I'm going to rot inside of it.
Satoshi was waiting for both of them, she thinks. Satoko kept her promise to become strong, but Shion, who was supposed to take care of Satoko, didn't. Just at that moment, she feels something step up behind her, that invisible thing that's been following her this whole time.
Then, I finally realized it. That thing is me. I had always been there, standing behind myself and watching me break that promise. I cried and gave up on myself. What will happen to me now? I don't want to be in this darkness. I don't want to be all bloody. Please don't leave me. If I give up on myself, what will happen to my body? There will be nothing left. The only thing I'll have left in me is an evil demon. Ah, I get it. I've known it for a long time now. I am nothing but a demon. A demon's heart can never feel pain. A demon doesn't cry.
You know who is still crying? Mion. Especially now that she sees that Satoko is dead.
I never knew how fun it would be to see other people cry and scream. I've already had plenty of fun in this human world. Maybe soon I'll kill myself and go back to hell. But don't worry. I'll make sure I kill you first. Wait, you like Kei-chan, don't you? Okay, I'll rip Kei-chan apart before your eyes. What a great idea!
Unfortunately, Shion had one more opportunity to save herself. She was so close. You could feel it, couldn't you? She could have figured out the truth, but she didn't. Instead, she decided to close her heart even more and call herself a demon. Of all of the chapters of Higurashi we've experienced so far, this one is probably the most tragic. After she returns to the house, Shion calls Keiichi again. They talk about Satoko and Rika, and Shion tells him that she thinks they were killed.
Why kidnap someone and then kill them? Screw curses! Are people's lives really that cheap? Erasing them and killing them without a second thought like this?
You're right. You're absolutely right. It would take a demon.
Dirty! You're fucking dirty, Ryukishi! This shit was right under our fucking noses this whole time, you piece of fucking garbage! Keiichi begs Shion to tell him why the curse keeps happening.
Of course. The curse of Oyashiro-sama never existed. It was just a bizarre environment that allowed people to kill in the name of Oyashiro-sama. Nothing would have happened unless there were demons who danced within it.
And there it is again. Shion echoes Keiichi's sentiments from Chapter 3. She, like him back then, has become a demon. Whether metaphorical or very real, at this point, we have no idea. Shion puts on another fake crying routine, talking about how scared she is. That's why she told the mayor, after all. But then Keiichi hits her with a real one. How could she have told the mayor when there was no time for her to have done so?
Very good, Keiichi Maebara. You know who I am, don't you? I'm impressed. Corner me even further. Corner me so the demon inside can't come up with excuses, so that it can't escape.
Shion, there's no way you could have seen the mayor, but if you did see him, it could have only been right before he disappeared.
Very good, Kei-chan! That's right. It's me. I'm the one. Was he going to tell the police? Or come here by himself? If Kei-chan came here alone, that would be smart of him. He couldn't complain about being eaten by a demon then. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him gruesomely while Shion watches. I only ever thought you were just a funny guy. I never thought I could expect so much from you.
Shion waits for Keiichi to come to her. She waits all night. And then finally, the next morning, Keiichi and Rena show up at her door. Well, this is unusual. Aren't you two going to school?
We stayed home today.
Kei-chan is one thing, but you two, Rena? You two are such troublemakers. Even though I've skipped over most of the repeat sections in this video for the sake of time, can I just say how much I love the second half of this chapter? How it takes everything we knew from Chapter 2 and contextualizes it in such an interesting way. Because now, from Shion's perspective, Keiichi and Rena seem such a very long way away. They've almost become more objects, obstacles than people. But we remember. We remember how they felt in this moment, how scared and confused and upset Keiichi was, how they've just had a conversation with Oishi about how they're going to help him arrest their best friend. Or at least the girl they think is their best friend, even though Mion is really in a cage in the basement. How sad this moment was. And now, from this perspective, how ratcheted with tension it is instead. In this moment, Shion has to rethink her plan a little. She expected either Keiichi alone or him and the police. But Rena being here complicates things. So she plans to try to trick Keiichi into coming with her to the basement alone.
Rena, why don't you try to figure out what I'm attempting to do and stop me? You too, Kei-chan. If you figured out I was Shion, why don't you try to figure out the rest? I will act like a demon. I will struggle until the very last moment. So don't hold back.
Unfortunately for Shion, right now, Keiichi and Rena are playing a very different game than she is. And like everyone else in her life, they have no idea that her and Mion have switched. Like last time, Keiichi first apologizes for entering the ritual storehouse, and then Rena lays out her reasoning for why she thinks Shion kidnapped and murdered Satoko and Rika, Sherlock style.
Rena, I was right about you. I don't like you. You really are just too sharp.
Finally, she admits her deeds, and Keiichi and Rena ask her why. Shion is disappointed that they aren't being more forceful, that they're even trying to understand her. So she weaves them a tale of Hinamizawa, half of which was from the stuff Takano told her, and the other half of which is entirely made up.
I told them that people used to make canned human meat and conducted gruesome research during the war.
Hey, so Do you remember, okay, all the way back at the beginning of this video, right? Okay, bear with me. When I said that Shion's dislike of canned food stemmed from a creepy story that Kasai told her sounded kind of familiar. It was a hint. All along, it was a fucking hint. If you had realized in that moment that since Shion is the one with the dislike of canned food, that it would make far more sense for her to be telling the story, then, you would have already had this entire chapter basically figured out. But it was so casually dropped, and it's probably been so long since you've played the second chapter that the whole thing went entirely over your head. I hate this. I want to die now, please. That's so goddamn genius. Also, we learn now that that entire story is bullshit.
You both look so serious. You two are such fools.
She's not talking to Keiichi and Rena in this moment. Not really. She's talking to you. For having bought into this story in the first place, for having incorporated it into your theories. There's a lot of red herrings in this tale, and this is the first of many to be revealed for what they are. Shion then talks about inheriting the demon and makes a big show of showing them the tattoo on her back, banking on them telling her she doesn't have to show them, which they do.
They must really believe I'm their best friend Mion. My goodness. The demon has won already. They were doing so well at the beginning, too.
But Rika-chan and Satoko-chan, you killed them, didn't you, Mi-chan?
Come on, Rena. Try to figure out who I really am. You still believe Shion, my victim, is the real culprit? Poor Shion. I'm making Rena believe that you're responsible.
Because, of course, since they believe she's Mion, since they care for her, the demon has already won. Shion asks to take a walk with Keiichi just one last time, and since they both think she's Mion, they think she has feelings for him. So they consent.
The game was over. Too bad, Rena. At least this was more fun than if Kei-chan came alone. I thought someone like her would see the demon in me. I guess I was wrong. Too bad.
She takes Keiichi's arm and reminisces that if she had been Mion, she probably would have fallen for him too.
I almost saw Satoshi-kun in that smile. The Keiichi I knew was worthless and superficial. I never realized he could smile like Satoshi-kun.
Keiichi asks if her and Shion get along well, and we repeat the same conversation about them being more like a left and right hand than two individuals. Though now that Shion thinks back on it, she realizes that that way of thinking was one that only Mion had. Shion only let her be Mion for a while. Using the hand metaphor, there's always going to be one dominant hand, after all.
Who am I? I never had a solid identity in the first place. I was Mion, then I was Shion. I should have just accepted that. But something has changed. I don't even know if I'm Mion or Shion anymore. Had I really been stupid enough to hope that Rena would figure that out for me?
She tells him that Shion is still alive, and together they go down to the basement, where she'll commit her final crime, and both Mion and Keiichi will be there as her witnesses.
I'll say it as many times as I need to. Mion Sonozaki is the best friend I could ever have.
You are such a fool. You don't sound cool at all. Come on, Keiichi. This is obviously a trap, don't you see?
She leads him down to the basement, shows him all the terrible things she's done. How can he still really believe that his best friend Mion committed these crimes? But we know right at this moment how much Keiichi is struggling with this, how he's trying so hard not to turn away from it, not deny his best friend Mion. He's trying to finally respect her, but that's ironically the one thing that he shouldn't be doing right now. If you thought Chapter 2 was tragic, then this is even worse.
This was a game of murder. The demon was trying to capture Keiichi and kill him before Mion's eyes. But Keiichi had a chance. If he figured out I wasn't his best friend, then he'd win.
But he won't. There's no chance. Because he's trying to acknowledge Mion.
You are Mion's best friends, right? Don't you believe in her?
That's exactly how she's pulled the wool over his eyes, and she doesn't even realize it.
I killed the Satoshi-kun within me so easily. And you will do the same. You don't deserve to live.
She shows Keiichi Mion in the cell, and Keiichi tries to calm her down as she panics before Shion gets him with the stun gun.
Here you are, demon. Go ahead and take my soul. Satoshi-kun hates me and I hate myself too. I'm going to complete my revenge. I'm going to become a murderer that nobody could sympathize with. So please, grant me the worst possible ending.
Can you hear it, Shion? I'm going to get started now! Savor Kei-chan's fresh screams to your heart's content!
Give it a fucking rest.
Once again, Shion tells Keiichi her real plan, but before she can continue to monologue, he says something that stops her in her tracks.
Who are you?
Huh? I'm Mion. Mion Sonozaki. Have you lost your mind from fear?
No. You're not. There's no way you can be Mion Sonozaki.
She gives Keiichi one last chance to figure out who she is.
Come on, Kei-chan. Guess who I am. Why don't you try and save Mion, the girl who fell in love with you?
A demon.
Isn't it so cool that the same scene, based on the perspective you're viewing it from, can have two different moments in the same conversation act as the climactic moment? Isn't that just so fucking neat? Because in the original, this moment was the lead up to Keiichi's climax where he begs Mion to beat the demon, but in this version, it happens now. The prime moment of tension is when he might just guess who she is. Unfortunately for Keiichi, he comes to an entirely different conclusion.
He didn't accept the fact that Mion was a murderer. And not just that, either. He protected the Shion in his heart as well. That's why I'm a demon, and not Mion or Shion, huh? But isn't that just right on the money?
Kei-chan! Are you trying to drown me in my own tears?
You can do it, Mion. Don't lose to this piece of shit demon. Don't give up. Fight. Fight!
He's right. I didn't fight back. How did he know? I lost to the demon.
She tells Keiichi then about the demon, how it has always lived inside her, how she fought it back with reason, but just how one small moment allowed it to wake back up again.
You're the reason that everything got so messed up.
It's about the doll. It's still about the doll. Just like in Chapter 2, it's all about this fucking doll, but in an entirely different way, an entirely different context than we knew at the time.
He made Mion cry. And when Mion cried, she talked to Shion.
I became jealous of her for having someone she loved so close to her. It was a very small jealousy. But that little feeling woke up the demon who was sleeping deep inside of me.
Of course, even as she thinks this, she also realizes that she shouldn't pin the blame entirely on Keiichi. The demon was always bound to wake up, and everything that has happened is all her fault. She explains her torture method to Keiichi and begins to prepare to execute it when he asks her to make him a promise.
Give that body back to Mion.
He doesn't know what he's just said. This boy doesn't know how right he is and what he just asked her. Of course, then he has to be the jackass he is and ask for his life too, and he and Shion joke around.
Then I knew. I knew why Shion fell in love with him. He's different from Satoshi-kun, but he's a good guy.
Of course, that's the exact moment when the police begin breaking down the door. Rena was smart after all, and Shion realizes that she won't be able to torture and kill him like she wanted.
I'm sorry for disgracing Mion.
She knocks him out again with the stun gun. Then she releases Mion from the cell and tells her to change clothes again. She obliges, and Shion tells her to go down the secret passage in the well, but just when she gets to the point of no return, Shion holds the stun gun to her head.
I didn't kill Kei-chan, just as you wanted. You told me I could kill you instead, didn't you? I'm going to keep our promise.
Are you killing me out of revenge for Satoshi?
If you know that much, then you should have been prepared. Go apologize to Satoshi-kun at the bottom of the well.
Sis, Satoshi isn't at the bottom of the well.
She clarifies that all she said to Shion earlier was that if he was killed here, that's where he would have been. However, she always liked Satoshi too, so after he disappeared, she looked into things on her end, and unlike Shion, she had access to the top, to Oryo. And what she found out was absolutely unbelievable. The Sonozaki family had nothing to do with Satoshi's disappearance. All this time, Shion thought for sure it was them. Everyone did. As it turns out, the secret of the Sonozaki's power is simple. Everyone believes that they did something, and Oryo simply nods meaningfully and lets everyone believe it.
Oryo just smiled at things she had nothing to do with, as if she was pulling the strings. When the damn construction site manager was killed, Oryo smiled meaningfully. When the Hojo family fell off the cliff, when the Furude couple died violently, when Satoshi-kun's aunt died and Satoshi-kun disappeared, the hag just smiled meaningfully. No, that's a lie. Don't try to fool me. You know the curse system, right? The hag didn't need to give the command for Satoshi-kun to be attacked. That was the system!
Granny told me that she had tried to find out who was actually behind this curse of Oyashiro-sama for a long time, but she couldn't. Shion questions her about all the weird behavior she's seen, about Rika attacking her with a syringe, but Mion doesn't have any answers for her. Shion goes through all the options. It couldn't have been the Kimiyoshi, as the mayor thought it was the Sonozakis. It couldn't have been the Furudes either, as they were victims of the curse. So who was it? Who could have possibly done this? Our number one suspect this whole time has been the Sonozaki family. So if it's not them, then who in the absolute fuck? And what does this mean for Shion?
Did I kill all the wrong people? People who had nothing to do with Satoshi-kun's disappearance at all?
But true to her character till the end, Shion rejects this answer. She thinks that Mion is lying to her and calls herself a demon till the very end.
Shion, if you are truly innocent, you can go to heaven. Apologize to Satoshi-kun for me.
She tasers her. But Shion doesn't follow her.
Until I find the perfect way to end my life, I'm going to live.
The epilogue for this chapter follows chapter 2 pretty closely. First, we are told about the aftermath of the events that occurred on the 22nd of June. Mion is of course missing, and Shion is left in a catatonic state of shock, though we now know that since Mion is already dead, there's only one sister left to stab Keiichi, so that state of shock is absolutely fake. Well, at least at first.
I continued to be haunted by the presence Rena Ryugu had talked about. It was so close that it could almost touch my back.
Her new current theory is that this presence has now become the ghost of Mion. She tells Shion to die every night, saying it's not fair that she still gets to live. One night, she swears she hears Mion banging on her door, trying desperately to get in, to kill her too. So she jumps from her balcony to the one next door, and decides that now it's time to go kill Keiichi once and for all. Keiichi comes to meet her, still thinking she's Mion, to give her the doll. Shion, however, is fucking bonkers at this point, giggling insanely to herself and all. She's officially gone too far for help.
They're about to come up behind me to take me away. I won't get to decide how I die. Shion won't allow me to. No wonder I dropped her down the well. It wasn't only her. None of the people I killed chose to die how they did.
Are you okay? Don't force yourself.
I'll kill him, kill him, kill him. I'll avenge Satoshi-kun's death. I'll avenge his death. This guy is Shion's beloved. I hate her. I'll kill him and teach her a lesson.
And then, of course, as we remember very clearly, she stabs him.
I made it before Shion killed me. I got back at her.
After this, Shion returns to her apartment, thinking that that was all just a dream. While clambering back onto her balcony, in her delusion, she slips, hitting her head on the concrete corner, and then falling to her death some several stories below. As she falls, her final thoughts, of course, are about Satoshi.
Sure. I believe you'll return. I'll be waiting for you. I'll take care of Satoko. I'll wait for you with her. We'll be good girls. You left your precious sister to me, and nobody else. I love you, Satoshi-kun.
She apologizes to everyone she's hurt, and wonders if she can repay them with her own death.
If Satoshi-kun could give me another chance, I wouldn't make the same mistake again. Never again. Here comes the ground. Bye. I love you.
Huh? And then she dies.
Alright, it's lunchtime. Hey, Brenna, put our desks together.
My lunch is meatballs today.
Sounds good. This old man will have some then. Rika-chan, bring your desk over.
I'm coming. Whoosh.
Unfortunately, meatballs are my favorite too. I won't allow you to have any.
Unfortunately, I won't let you do that either, Satoko.
You have to have some veggies, so I cooked some squash for you.
Whoa, that's harsh, Shion.
I hate squash. Ugh.
Don't be so picky about your food. Squash is very nutritious. You're still growing, so you need to think about things like that. As long as I live, I won't let you have an unbalanced diet. Here, guys, have some. Steamed squash is really delicious.
Munch, munch. Satoko, it's really sweet.
Yeah, it's super good. The balance of flavors is perfect. Satoko, don't eat this. It's too good for you.
Excuse me? I don't like your tone.
Just try it. Take a bite.
See? Isn't it good?
Well, it isn't so bad.
Of course it isn't. I've been working hard every day to get you to overcome your dislike of squash. Okay, now that that's done with, why don't you overcome your fear of eggplants, green peppers, and asparagus within the year?
Stop joking! At this rate, I'll transfer to a school in Okinomiya.
Come on, I'm in charge of your health. Since Satoshi can ask me to take care of you, I won't let you eat junk food either.
I hate you, Shion-san. I hate squash.
You know, just to rub it in. Oh my god. This was a nightmare. This is the longest script to date. I think with maybe the exception of the very last chapter, this might be the longest Higurashi video, and my god was there a lot to unpack here. Chapter 5 was a very different sort of beast to all of the other chapters so far. Of course, it's the first of the answer arcs, so that's to be expected, but I think it really sets a good example for our expectations going forward, while really bridging the gap between the rest of the chapters and the ones we've already seen. From here on out, the arcs will be a lot less horrific, I think, but they will have a lot more twists and turns, and will be, of course, just as heart-wrenching. Shion herself makes for an exceptionally good protagonist. It's Ryokishi finally getting to get out of good boy Keiichi's head. Although he had a little more individuality in his characterization than most visual novel protagonists, he was clearly a play on one. He shares a lot of traits with your typical main character. By shifting the protagonist to Shion, a manipulative, selfish, but ultimately sympathetic character, at least until the end, you can start to sense the broadening scope of Higurashi's storytelling and ambitions. Even if we partially get back into Keiichi's shoes for the next one, there's always another side to every story, another perspective to see, and Shion, as a glorious example of a villain protagonist done well, opens our eyes to that possibility. She also showed us just how many red herrings are present in this tale, and it's becoming increasingly apparent that the challenge of solving this mystery is going to be shifting through the numerous amount of information and clues and trying to piece together what's really important. There's a lot of stuff being thrown at us, and with the reveal that our primary suspects, the Sonozakis, might not be as culpable as they initially appeared, we kind of find ourselves back at square one. It may feel like a lot of this chapter, in that case, was worthless, that we didn't learn anything at all. But we actually did. We've learned several valuable lessons about the methodology and the ways we should go about viewing the curse of Oyashiro-sama. Shion got stuck in one way of thinking and literally prevented herself from seeing past it, so we can't let ourselves fall into that trap, because with just 3 more chapters to go, now is where it gets serious. I hope you're ready, because the final fall into the answer begins now. But for the moment, don't think too hard about it. I don't want you to fry your brains. And, above all else, try to get some sleep tonight.
Special thanks goes out to my priests of the hog and my elder hog prophets, Adra, Chronoton, Eshok7, Greyman, Jonathan Hummel, Casey and Moore, Ventus Agri, and Xavier Pena.
Thanks a bunch, guys.